The video game Western is a rare breed of game, especially when talking about games that take into account the full nature of the genre rather than just slapping a cowboy hat on the main character and calling it a day. In the mid-2000s, there was pretty much only 3 games that excelled at bringing the Western genre into the video game ecosystem, releasing consecutively year after year, starting in 2004 with Rockstar's Red Dead Revolver, moving on to 2005 with Neversoft's Gun, and finally in 2006, the game in question today,
the Call of Juarez.
Since I have covered the first 2 titles on this channel, as well as some other westerns here and there, I think it's time to take a look back at Call of Juarez and see how it holds up to the competition. Call of Juarez is a first-person shooter developed by Techland, the same minds behind Dead Island and the Dying Light games. They were making games since 1999, but it wasn't until Call of Juarez that they found some serious footing in the industry, and as a result, there were 3 follow-up titles to the pioneering western: Bound in Blood, a prequel to the first game, The Cartel, a story that's set in the modern day, and Gunslinger, a game unrelated story-wise to the others but within the same universe and similar gameplay. In the game, there are 2 main characters with branching and interweaving storylines. You play as both in a sort of cat versus mouse narrative style. The first character is Billy Candle, an unsuccessful treasure hunter and well-known troublemaker, the classic kid that's in way over his head, and also the mouse in our metaphor. And the second character being Reverend Ray McCall, a former gunslinger turned devout man of God, who is just as crazy as any number of religious nuts in Western media, who takes his role, of course, as the cat. After 2 years of hunting for gold and riches in Juarez, Mexico, Billy returns to his hometown of Hope, Texas, to see his ma and maybe find another calling in life. He arrives to his family farm to see his mom and stepfather have been murdered, bodies in the dirt, with Call of Juarez posted on the barn door written with their blood. Preacher McCall arrives at the barn after stories of a commotion and gunshot hit the town. He rushed to the property with concern because Billy's stepfather is also McCall's brother. After arriving and seeing their bodies, he also sees Billy creeping around the corner and fleeing upon the sight of the preacher, leading McCall to believe that Billy is responsible for the murders. The game then puts you in alternating controls of Billy and the preacher, as the preacher chases down Billy to avenge his brother and stepsister, and Billy tries to find the true murderers of his parents and find out why they did it. But before we continue on with the plot, let's rewind and talk about the development of this game.
Billy. What have you done, boy? For the love of God, what have you done?
Call of Juarez was originally titled Lawman and was intended to be a fast-paced shooter with a distinct arcadey feel to it, similar to quite a few Western titles of that era. But within development, Techland decided to take a step back and make a game with a stronger focus on the plot and the storytelling, wanting to be seen as a serious player in the first-person shooter market. Similar to the developers of Darkwatch in 2005, Techland realized that the first-person shooter genre was oversaturated with sci-fi and military shooters, so they devoted themselves to not only making a Western-themed FPS game, but a serious Western game. No funny business here, partner. Fast draw duels? Got 'em. Drinking whiskey? Got 'em. Horseback riding? Got 'em. Making love to saloon girls? Got 'em. Oh shit. Oh wait, this is not what it looks like.
You know what? He just left.
But really, they put a lot of time and effort into making the game as authentic as possible. All the guns in the game are modeled after and function the same as real firearms of the time. Same as the clothing, the flora, the fauna, and the architecture. They worked with real horseback riding experts to make sure that those segments of the game were as realistic as possible. And hey, I can't think of another game off the top of my head where you can slap a horse's ass to send it off running as a distraction. This game was meant to provide a new level of emerging gameplay. As far as 2006 standards go, I think they did a fantastic job. The script for the game was tag teamed by 2 guys named Harris Orkin and Pavel Selinger. Selinger was also serving as the game's lead designer and artist. He came up with the basic outline of the plot as well as the characters in the game, while Orkin got into the nitty-gritty and wrote the characters' dialogue and story specifics. Not surprisingly, the game's tone is based on several iconic Western films. Specific ones named by Orkin and Selinger are The Searchers, Nevada Smith, Pale Rider, and Unforgiven. Preacher Ray, one of the most complex characters in the game, was actually an amalgamation of Clint Eastwood's character in Unforgiven, Will Money, as well as the Saint of Killers from Garth Ennis's Preacher, and the Pilgrim in his Just a Pilgrim series. And visually, he was inspired by the lead singer of the band Fields of the Nephilim, Carl McCoy. I personally see a ton of similarity with Reverend Green from the book Blood Meridian, something I also saw with Reverend Josiah Reed in the game Gun, but that's of course just the character's trope, the madman preacher in the Western tale. Orkin goes on to state that nearly every single character in the game was based on some sort of Western character in some sort of movie or TV show. The Mexican bandits, including Juarez, were inspired by Sergio Leone's Man with No Name trilogy. Manson and his company were inspired by the corrupt sheriff in Pale Rider, and even using the show Dr. Quinn Medicine Woman for another inspiration. Another thing Techland nailed for the good old time of 2006 was their physics and graphics engine, using a new version of their in-house Chrome engine. It had ragdoll effects of bodies and objects, wind effects that also interacted with fire, smoke, and liquids. The graphics section was powerful enough to have large open areas with dense vegetation, with state-of-the-art, for 2006, shader models like per-pixel lighting and advanced rendering techniques. Like all this shit I know nothing about.
Wow.
A lot of this stuff are things Far Cry 2 is known for, even to this day, especially the fire and the wind physics. But to put that into perspective for Call of Juarez, Far Cry 2 came out 2 years after this game. While this game was initially made for the PC, there was an Xbox 360 version that released the next year in 2007. Techland even ported the game over themselves because they were actually really excited with the hardware, and they thought that the game would stand out on the console even more than it did on the PC, with their serious Western gameplay. They especially liked that the Xbox controller had 2 triggers on it, so when you held revolvers akimbo style in the game, you really feel like you're shooting 2 guns.
Anyway, I started blasting. Bang!
Surprisingly, there was also a graphical improvement for the game moving to the 360's hardware. Throwing even more technical terms around like I know what any of this shit means, they remade some levels and even re-recorded most of the game's cutscenes using motion capture, changing the entire appearance of the game dramatically. This game was essentially remastered from the ground up for this port. The entire beginning of the game was rebuilt. It's kind of insane how much time and effort that they put into porting this game on the 360. After the 360 version released, the PC version was updated as well with all these features, given that DirectX 10 allows for these upgrades to work. With that being said though, with all those fancy terms thrown around and those tantalizing tales of passionate developers making the game exactly how they want it, let's get into how the game plays and see what it's all about.
I thought men of God were men of peace, Padre. For a preacher, you sure don't seem too damn peaceful.
So with the game being a first-person shooter, I don't have to explain that we're going to be shooting shit in the game. The main thing to talk about as far as gameplay goes is the fact that you switch characters throughout the game, from Billy to Ray, and with each character comes some variation in how the game plays. It's not an insane switch up with each man, controlling them is about the same, the HUD elements all look the same, they can both wield the same weapons except a few unique items, they both heal using whiskey bottles, they can both ride horses, throw dynamite, and they can scrap hand to hand. When playing as Billy though, the focus on the level design is more stealth based. He is weaker than Ray, but on the flip side he's much quicker and more agile, being able to jump higher, gripping on ledges to pull himself up, and he runs faster as well. With that, Billy can also use 2 unique weapons that Ray cannot, a whip and a bow. Using the bow allows for silent kills to fit within this stealth gameplay, and aiming with the bow also causes a bullet time effect, or arrow time effect, I guess, and that slows time briefly to allow for well-placed shots. The whip on the other hand is more of a tool than a weapon. It's mainly used to knock things over in the way, or smack a spider or a rattlesnake in the face, or lassoing tree branches to swing across gaps and ledges. And it's for that reason that I hate it, because the platforming in Billy's section of the game is absolutely ass. The amount of time that I died because of janky platforming is an amount too high, and I really wish it was not in this game. Playing as Ray makes the game more of a typical shoot 'em up game. Ray is stronger and he moves slower than Billy, but he takes a lot more shots before going down due to wearing some body armor. But with the trade-off being that he can't climb as high or run as fast. And while Ray cannot use a bow or a whip, he can use A Bible. He can read a random Bible passage that apparently has the possibility to have enemies run away, freeze, or drop their weapons. I tried it a few times and I never got it to happen, but that's a neat mechanic to have regardless. Other than reading the good book, Ray can also fan his revolver like a true gunslinger and enter a feature called concentration mode, where you can draw 2 revolvers from your hip, getting a reticle for each and moving them towards your enemies by controlling the screen around the reticle rather than the reticles themselves. It plays a lot like Deadeye in the Red Dead Redemption games. Ray also gets into duels throughout his levels where the same mechanic occurs, only it's on a countdown timer now and it's not really fluid or fun to use. The game alternates who you play as level to level, but majority of the time Billy goes through an area first using his unique ways of traveling by stealth and platforming, only to have Ray hot on his trail finding a new way to the same point, usually by brute force and a lot of murder, sometimes even revealing how hot on the trail he is by the characters seeing each other and passing at certain points. The level design of each area is relatively open, although each character can only use a certain portion of the level given the different playstyles of each. Take this level early on where Billy is escaping from some bandits. He tries to cross the bridge into the mine but it breaks, and he rides the river downstream until finding a path that leads up and over to the mine to get onto the train tracks. But when Ray arrives, he simply uses some heavy boxes to stack and climb into another entrance to the mine, going through the tunnels, murdering everything in his path to make it to the same spots as Billy. The thing that I didn't like about the levels was its ambiguity and design. Listen, I game a good bit, I dabble in the joysticks, I can typically read where the game needs me to go if it's a linear game. But in this game, there are several parts where I was just straight up lost, or thought the game wanted me to go in a different direction. Take the level we just talked about for example. When the bridge broke and you're thrown into the river, I thought the game wanted me to keep going down the river and dodge all these rocks until you get to some sort of stopping point. So for like 6 tries, I kept dodging rocks, only to get this same rock that is impossible to dodge, and even if you do dodge it, you just die anyway. And that's only because the game just wanted you to get off on this shore just to the left, almost immediately after getting in the water. I mean, it makes sense, you were trying to cross to the other side, but come on, could you not have any sort of traditional level design element to let me know that is where you want me to go? I'm not big on game design elements, that's not my realm, I just play the games, but this game needed some upgrades for sure. I needed ledges that I'm supposed to climb marked for me, pretty please. There are some truly iconic levels, like the field where Billy hunts for rabbits. It's incredibly large and flourishing with plants and wildlife. It's super impressive, especially given the game's time period. And the area of climbing Eagle Mountain was fantastic as well. It's a bitch gameplay wise because it's just non-stop platforming, but the views and the design of it are all fantastic. I did really appreciate the stealth missions with Billy as they are really well made and even offer some interesting mechanics, like lightning can reveal you from the shadows for a moment. But the main thing that I like is that if you fail at the stealth, like I often do in games, you're able to fight your way out of the area by running to the next area or just killing all the bandits in your way. Shooting guys in the face with a bow from the shadows never really gets old though, and sometimes you barely miss and you take their hat off with the arrow, which is honestly just as impressive to see. The first person cinematics in the game also look really good and keep you invested in the story of the game. There are no breakaway cutscenes, everything is within the perspective of the character that you're playing, and it looks really good, especially considering the time that this game was released. Some other aspects of gameplay that I really liked were the ragdoll physics. Oh boy, how I love me some body flipping after getting blasted with a shotgun. So satisfying and easily made the shotgun my favorite weapon in the game. Billy or Ray, I'm using the shotty. And speaking of the weapons, they also have a durability element to them. Shoot them too much and it'll blow up in your hand. It's not obnoxious in a way, and I actually kind of liked it. You knew how long a weapon was going to last you depending on what it says when you picked it up. If you're picking up a weapon labeled as a rusty 6-shooter, then that thing's going to blow up in your palm before the level is over. So it made me keep my eyes out for new weapons to grab and use. Healing is plentiful throughout the game, it never really was an issue. Enemies drop whiskey bottles and each area of a gunfight usually has a few regardless. And one bottle heals a large amount of health anyway. Apparently in the 360 version, they just made health regenerate over time rather than making you pick up whiskey bottles, even though the bottles are still in the game, just tossed around everywhere. But I bet the gameplay didn't change all that much given the new health regeneration because the pickups never really were a limited resource in the game. Health was never really a problem. There were obviously a lot of good mechanics in the game. The gunplay was decent, the level designs were beautiful and relatively open, and the ragdoll physics and the stealth sections were a lot of fun. However, the gameplay had a lot of things that I did not like the dueling mechanic was janky, and I hated that it was scripted into the game. Red Dead Revolver did it better, and that game came out 2 years earlier. Same with the fistfights, scripted in moments that felt terrible. They should have been cut entirely. The levels were a little too ambiguous in my opinion. I never quite knew where I was supposed to go, and the game just kind of kills you if you go the wrong way. It's not like you can backtrack and explore to find the right path. It's get it right or die, I guess. But the most fantastic part of this game is the swap between characters. The game knows when to make you feel like the hunter and like the hunted, and each role is done nearly to perfection, and no time is really overspent with each character. Just when you start to feel complacent with Ray's body armor and menacing presence, you're given Billy again to lasso a whip around a tree and hide in a tent from bandits. It's a great setup, and I think that it's the main gimmick that this game has going for it. And overall, this game was good to play. But after all, this is a serious Western game, so let's get into the storytelling portion and see if it makes the struggles of gameplay worth it. There will be spoilers ahead for the entire story of Call of Juarez, and if you care about that sort of thing, feel free to skip ahead. The game takes place in 1884. You're introduced to Billy. Billy never knew who his father was, so therefore his last name is unknown. However, due to his mother giving him a medallion at a young age with a candlestick on it, the kids took to calling him Billy Candle, which he took as a win over racial slurs since his mother was from Mexico and he grew up in a predominantly white town called Hope, Texas. That's right over the Mexican-US border. Billy is returning home after 2 years of being out on the road. He left his town of Hope because his stepfather Thomas would beat him silly every day for no reason, but also to prove to himself and everyone else that he was meant for greatness. He left to pursue the legendary gold of Juarez, the mysterious fortune that is the common Western trope of lost gold from a time long, long ago. The gold was rumored to be ransom money for Moctezuma, who was held hostage by conquistadors, but the city fell and the gold was lost forever, and it's said to now have a curse over it, causing all those who seek it to go insane, with those that have lost their minds labeled as having caught the Call of Juarez.
That's the title of your film.
So anyway, Billy is heading home after his unsuccessful trip, broke and hungry, but excited to see his mom and not really anyone else in town. In fact, he specifically tries to avoid 4 different people in particular, including his abusive stepfather Thomas, the sheriff Tim Powell, the saloon owner Clyde Forrester, and his uncle, Reverend Ray McCall. Of course, he runs into all of them nearly immediately. He goes through the town stealing a gun off some poor farmer and then promptly losing said gun to the sheriff. Then the first thing on his mind is retrieving yet another gun. He gets the idea to take the derringer off of one of the saloon girls, Susie, resulting in him getting caught by the saloon owner, Clyde, while receiving some of the goods for free, and then fleeing out of the window, followed by nearly every man with a gun in town because Clyde decides to offer a half hour with Susie if they get their hands on Billy.
A half hour with Susie for anybody who can get his hands on that little greaser.
So Billy then flees, of course, to continue on his way to his parents' farm to see his mom, stealing some bullets from the local madman on the way. However, when he arrives at his parents' house, he hears his mom scream before running up the hill, thinking that Thomas was being abusive again. Here the game cuts to Reverend Ray. He's in the middle of a sermon, scolding the locals for their sin, especially that snake Clyde, before someone busts into the church, telling the Reverend that they heard shots at his brother's farm, with others immediately claiming to have seen Billy in town and blaming him for the commotion. The Reverend immediately runs to the farm to find his brother and stepsister slain, with Call of Juarez.
That's the name of the game.
Written in blood on the barn door, before he sees Billy creeping out from behind the door, cementing him as the culprit in the Reverend's eyes. He chases Billy, but it's no use. He's much faster than the Reverend, and he eventually cuts a bridge down in order to get away. The Reverend returns to his brother's homestead to find looters on their corpses already, and he dishes out the hands of God to all those scallywags. From here you realize how crazy and blinded by delusion that the preacher actually is.
Why have you forsaken me? How could you let this happen? Help me, Lord, please. Tell me, what do you want from me?
He heads back to the church to grab what he calls his equalizers to hunt down Billy at the instruction of God. The sheriff tries to stop him from being a vigilante, but the townspeople already worked up shoot the sheriff dead, causing Ray to kill every man in town with a gun in their hands as the only way to bring peace back to Hope, Texas, ending with burning down the saloon and killing Clyde in cold blood. From here, Billy is on the run, not only from his crazy uncle, but from the murderous bandits that he encounters along the way, but also to try to find the true killers and their motives. He ends up stowing away on a train to San Jose, the hometown of his girlfriend that he met on his travels. However, the train gets overrun by bandits attempting to rob it, and Billy flees on foot on the way to Molly's farm. He steals a horse from a local farm before riding out to his main goal, encountering renegade Apaches all along the trail. He finally arrives to Molly's house. He sneaks inside of the house, avoiding her trigger-happy father and brother, but eventually has a fist fight in the hallway outside of her room before she opens the door and calms the boys down. He tells Molly his parents have been murdered, and he is on the run because they think he did it, but the conversation is shut short when her dad shows up and kicks him out, only letting him live because Molly begs him to do so. The Reverend hot on his trail shows up promptly with some Texas Rangers that he met on the way. They too know Billy Candle and are on his trail as well, with what they say is a warrant for his arrest. They tell Ray that Billy is on the farm up ahead with a group of rustlers led by a man named Ferguson, Molly's dad. So with a common cause in mind, Ray groups with the Rangers to ambush the Ferguson farm. A shootout ensues between the Rangers and the Ferguson farm, while Ray makes his way through the place in search of Billy, who he finds on the run out the back through a cornfield. He corners Billy on a cliff edge and shoots him down, letting him fall into the river below. Before hearing the screams back at the Ferguson farm, he heads back to tell the news of Billy's demise and to find out why he hears screaming. He soon finds out that the Rangers were actually just bandits in disguise, and they decide to kill the Reverend now that he's just in their way. But that doesn't go so well for them, as the Reverend is cracked at Fortnite. After killing the bandits, the Reverend learns that Ferguson is no rustler, he's an honest rancher, and the bandits kidnapped Molly before fleeing, making the Reverend second guess his actions, almost like he isn't incredibly out of his mind. He chases down the bandits, but it's too late. They escaped on a raft down the river with Molly in tow.
Oh God, what did I do? Righteous men are dead because of my blindness and arrogance. I killed Billy in your name too. Was I wrong, Lord? Was he telling me the truth? Was he innocent as well?
Meanwhile, Billy wakes up downriver, catered to by a man named Calmwater. Calmwater seems to know a lot about Billy and believes fate led Billy to him. He asks Billy to hunt down 3 rabbits with a bow. Billy thinks that this is payment for having saved his life, but Calmwater simply wants Billy to stay with him for a little bit longer. After returning with the 3 rabbits, he finds that Calmwater's tent has caught fire, and he rushes to toss buckets of water on it to put it out. After this, Calmwater sees his bravery, and he challenges Billy to climb Eagle Mountain unarmed in order to retrieve an eagle's feather from the nest on the top without harming the eagle to prove his strength and courage. Billy completes his challenge, but when he gets back to Calmwater's camp, he finds him dead, murdered by Manson and his boys before knocking out Billy.
Hello, boy.
Meanwhile, Reverend Ray has been chasing down the bandits that captured Molly. It ends up in a huge chase sequence with Molly in a stagecoach and Ray on horseback. The stagecoach doubles as a long journey to Mexico, something seen often in westerns. Hell, even Red Dead Redemption did it. But in Call of Juarez's regard, it's obnoxious and tedious, where it could have been more thematic and influential, where you could appreciate the gradual change in landscape and environment from forest to desert, instead of dodging dynamite on a horseback. It ends at a ranch with a man on a Gatling gun and a duel with one of Manson's men, who says that he knows the Reverend. He's heard stories of a gunslinger with knight's armor that's killed a bunch of men, giving a little more perspective into the Reverend's filthy past of being a murderous heathen before he found God. Before the man dies, he utters that they've taken Molly to Juarez, and he also says the man who killed the Reverend's brother is Juarez. Thinking that he's just repeating the same name of the place, he sets out to find the girl and avenge his misguided wrongdoings.
So, all the events have come full circle. Is that what you wanted, Lord? Very well. To Juarez.
Billy wakes up tied up in an Alcazar by a man named Juarez, who tells him that he is Billy's father. He tells Billy that his mother ran off with another man when she was still pregnant with him, and he's been searching for him ever since. Juarez also admits to killing Billy's mother and stepfather, but only because his stepfather started shooting first, and his mother simply got caught in the crossfire. He asks Billy for his medallion, as it's the key to finding the gold of Juarez, but Billy informs him that he lost the medallion in the river and he no longer has it. Juarez immediately flips the script and starts beating Billy, telling him that he gave him life and he can take it away. Clearly, he's not after Billy after any sort of fatherly love. He beats him non-stop until Billy eventually loses consciousness. Thinking that Billy is lying and hiding the medallion from him, Juarez brings in the captured Molly and threatens her life unless Billy can get the medallion back from wherever it is by sundown. So Billy heads out into the desert of Juarez, Mexico to look for either the medallion or the gold. He runs into a child at a graveyard that asks for his help burying his father. He offers Billy 100 pesos if he can help him, so he does, and in return, instead of money, the kid gives him a key to an abandoned church that he just has for whatever reason. He heads to the church and he finds 3 gravestones, something that he remembers from a passage his mother used to tell him. He uses the riddle to look through the correct gravestone and find a secret entrance under a large rock. However, in order to move the rock, he has to roll a boulder down a huge hill behind it to knock it out of the way, opening a hole in the ground that he must climb down if he is brave enough. He enters this cavernous area with aggressive spiders that will attack and swarm him. Eventually, this cavern turns into an entrance of an ancient temple, where Billy has to Squid Games his way across some sketchy bridge and some other traps before entering a large wooden door with nothing other than the lost gold of Juarez sitting in a nice pile right behind it. He is stun-locked by the treasure before being shoved to the ground by Juarez, who has been secretly following him this whole time. He confronts Billy about lying about knowing where the gold is, telling him that he'll kill him for betrayal just like he killed his mother. But before the killing happens, Billy skedaddles on out of there, up some crazy puzzle wall and mine shaft before eventually running into none other than Reverend Ray. Ray tells Billy that he misjudged him and that he's there to save not only him, but Molly. He tells Billy to go and hide while he deals with Juarez, who he soon finds out is a man and not just the name of the location, and he is the one responsible for his brother's death. He gets into a shootout with him in the gold room, and before he can kill him, Juarez runs off telling him that he will torture Molly if the gold is not brought to him by noon. During the chapter's transition, the preacher remembers his younger brother, not Thomas, but another brother named William. He talks about how he fell in love with a girl named Marissa in Juarez, but Marissa did not love him back, but instead he loved Thomas. He tracked them to these very caverns, where they also stumbled upon the gold. Struck with greed, Reverend Ray was going to kill Thomas and take the girl and the gold, but his brother William stepped in the middle, reaching into his coat for something, so Ray shot him dead. But really, all he was reaching for was a Bible, and from that moment on, Ray devoted his life to the Lord, and they all left the gold there, knowing that it was cursed, and that kind of explains how he knew where to go to rescue Billy. Ray rides up to Juarez's castle with Billy in tow, with a cart covered in burlap. Did he bring the gold to Juarez like he said? No, he brought all the smoke. He lets a Gatling gun rip through all of his men before hopping off and finishing off the killing a little more personally, storming the castle to save Molly. In the basement, he runs into Manson, the man who pulled the trigger and actually killed his brother and Marissa, and he fights him to the death in a dumbass boss fight that involves a lot of running back and forth between 2 rooms. After killing Manson, he takes his keys to the cell and he finds Molly tied up there. Shortly after, the roof opens up and dynamite starts getting thrown down, making him shoot them out of the sky so Molly doesn't get, well, exploded. However, a fire does start in the pit from all the dynamite and the straw on the ground. Meanwhile, even with no guns, Billy runs into the fort to help his uncle. He's tired of running away, and he decides to be brave and to save Molly. The kid who he helped earlier by burying his father gives him a bow and arrow, telling him to kill them all because they are the ones that killed his father in the first place. Billy runs up in the place, he kills some fools, he knocks over the water tower onto the fire that's in the pit, he releases Ray and Molly from the pit, and as he opens the door, Juarez comes in and shoots Ray. He tells Billy how he treated his mother like a whore, making all his men use her for whatever they wanted, and that once he kills him, he would do the same to Molly. However, his gun jams as he pulls the trigger, so he throws it down and he fights Billy hand to hand. Billy knocks him out and then he goes to hug Molly, thinking that for some reason Juarez is dead or something from a few punches. When his back is turned, however, Juarez goes to kill Billy with a dagger, but Reverend Ray shoots one last shot at his head to put him down for good, saving Billy and Molly to avenge himself in his eyes before finally passing away. The ending of the game circles around Billy and Molly standing over Ray McCall's grave, with Billy monologuing about how he's done running and he's no longer a nobody. The story of the game was good. It's a deep plot with a lot of characters and a lot going on, and I think that that's a selling point for the game. The main characters are very multi-dimensional, never fully falling within one side of the spectrum. Between the righteous fury of Reverend Ray and the story of finding courage of Billy Candle, both characters change quite a bit over the course of the game, and while that's typical for movies and novels, it's something pretty unique in video games from 2006, especially games considered shoot-'em-ups with a western theme. But overall, I think that the writing in this game was fantastic. I think all the twists and the turns in the game were actually well done. I did not expect Ray Ray to be anything more than a man blinded by faith, but in his heart he honestly felt that he was doing what was right. Even in his first chapter, he saves the dead sheriff's wife from vagrants trying to attack her. He acts on a righteous path even if he's very black and white about it, where the punishment of death isn't always the right answer, but it's still the one that he brings to the table. When he found out that he was played at the Ferguson farm though, he immediately sought forgiveness. He immediately chased down Molly to save her, and on finding Billy still alive, he repents all the wrong that he did to him, and he sacrifices himself to save him. He's a good guy in a way. He was just misguided in his finding Billy at fault for his brother's death. The whole story with the gold thing sort of fell flat to me though. So it's like a known secret that the gold is real. It's not entirely a legend. I mean, there's a modern day mine shaft built right up into the cavern where the gold is. So in my mind, the curse of the gold is scary enough to stop people from taking it. I mean, Ray, Thomas, and Billy's mother all knew where the gold was for sure. I can understand why Ray and Melissa didn't go after it after all those years, but Thomas was a drunk, abusive piece of shit. Why didn't he ever go after the gold? And also, why would Billy's mother essentially tell Billy how to get to the gold even from him being a baby? And even give him a medallion that solved the riddle at the abandoned church if she knew how the gold made people evil? Seems kind of misguided to give your kid all the tools to go reach it himself. But these are minor things. They can all be explained by any number of reasons, and maybe we'll get to some of that with the follow-up games. Speaking of which, let's talk about how this game panned out on the market and where the series ended up. Call of Juarez received generally mixed reviews on both the PC and the 360. Many people praised the soul that the game had with its deep plot lines and fleshed out characters, but there were obvious problems with a lot of the gameplay, such as Billy's platforming sections. Regardless, the game didn't really sell that well in North America, selling only 137,000 copies on both PC and Xbox. The sales were better in Europe, but no numbers are out there floating around. But it was enough for Techland to make a franchise out of the game and release 3 more titles, as well as establishing their name in the gaming world. Overall, this game was very mid. The story was great and the alternating gameplay was really cool between Ray and Billy, but looking back at this game 16 years later, it really shows this game's age, and it's hard to really appreciate all that it brought to the table back in the day. That was truly some iconic shit. I do recommend it if you're a fan of westerns, because it is a good western tale. Call of Juarez Bound in Blood may be one of the best follow-up games that I have ever played. It's a prequel to the first game in the series, and it seamlessly fills in the blanks and explains nearly the entire setup to the universe of Call of Juarez. It's better both on a technical front as well as a narrative front, having a deeper, more thought-out plot than the first game. It explains why a Bible-thumping preacher can kill so effectively, where Billy's mom got the medallion in the first place, and why Juarez is such a douchebag. The game also vastly improve the combat, the traversal mechanics, and the level designs. It's a prime example of a perfect sequel, and it was some of the most fun that I've ever had with a western title since playing Gun earlier this year. So today let's take a look at the sequel to Techland's pioneering western, Call of Juarez Bound in Blood. Call of Juarez Bound in Blood was released in 2009, 3 years after Call of Juarez on the PS3, Xbox 360, and the PC, again being developed by Polish game studio Techland and published by Ubisoft. Bound in Blood takes place a modest 17 years before the events of the first game and focuses on the familiar face of Reverend Ray McCall, as well as his 2 little brothers, Thomas, who we met briefly, and William, who never made an appearance. Even though Ray is a man of God in the first game, he is nothing short of an evil man in the second game, killing people with little to no reason and taunting their God while doing so. His brother Thomas is not much better, standing at Ray's hip every step of the way. The game starts with the 2 McCall brothers fighting in the Battle of Atlanta in the Civil War. Both of them are sergeants in the Confederate States Army. Towards the end of the war, in 1864, the Confederates were being overrun by the Union Army, and at a certain point, they decided to leave their dwindling post in order to save their family home from Union soldiers, burning everything in their path through the South, which historically was a super common thing at that time. Confederate soldiers deserted in large numbers, especially in the final years of the war, most notably during Sherman's march, to decide to fight for their families and homes rather than the Confederate Army's cause. So the McCall brothers leave their post to save their own kin and flee from the repercussions. They have become cold and violent and learned to take whatever they wanted without fear of retaliation because nothing could stand in their way. Eventually they end up in Mexico and they meet a few more familiar faces from the first game, Juarez and Marissa, the parents of the first game's protagonist, Billy Candle. It is also here in Mexico where the brothers first encounter the legend of the gold of Juarez, which at first seems like the means to obtaining a greater goal, but greed and lust get the better of them, as it does to all who search it out. Kinda like the whole theme behind the series so far, you know? But we can get into the plot of the game in just a little bit. It's fantastic, by the way. But first, let's talk about Techland making this game.
We can find some rich son of a bitch and put a gun to his head.
You're drunk.
I'm getting there.
When making Bound in Blood, Techland looked real hard at the reception to the first game, trying to find out what people enjoyed and what needed to be adjusted or removed. And as we saw with Monolith and Condemned, when developers do this, you end up with an absolute banger of a game. Developers just need to give the people what they want. They removed the clunky stealth and lasso platforming missions from the first game and made the gunplay the shining star that it deserves to be, refining all the aspects from the first and even adding some cool new stuff like unique concentration modes for each brother, as well as a super cool cover system where you can slowly control aiming over an obstacle or around a corner. Playing as Thomas with a rifle and doing this was super satisfying. Although I don't know which player feedback they were listening to when they decided to double down on the dueling in this game. There were so many duels in this game and they are not fun. I don't know if it's the PC version of the game or it's just bad across the board, but it took me dying almost 20 times each time it came up just to progress. They fucking suck. Techland also proudly flaunted off the latest version of their in-house Chrome engine, the same engine they used on the last game, although vastly improved upon. They can cram even more polygons on screen and add nice special effects as well, and creates even larger and more densely detailed open world levels that are really good looking. Look at this water. I'd get dysentery from all the death that happened upstream, but I'm taking a damn sip of this. The Polish are super proud of their in-house engine and all the technical advancements it offered, but I have no idea what any of this stuff means. I just play game look good and run good.
Sunshine and senoritas, nothing wrong with that.
The narrow city streets were the highlight for me, as well as the dense vegetation of the forest sections. Both feel so real and alive, especially when comparing them to the first game. Major upgrade. The shootouts felt like a blockbuster film most of the time, and the level design is largely to thank for that. If you're into the tech behind the game design, there's a super good interview done by PC Games Hardware with the CEO and main engine engineer of Techland about all the tech in their engine for this game, and I'll link it in the description if you want to read it. I'm not going to get into it here. I just want to point out real quick that the voice acting was really well done as well, with the voice actor for Ray returning with his gravelly grit, but also bringing in some unique voices for other new characters. William McCall, who also serves as the narrator to the game, is being voiced by Deputy James Garcia from Reno 911. The son of the Apache chief, Seeing Farther, is voiced by the same guy who did Prince Zuko in Avatar, and I could not stop hearing the similarities in the characters.
Because it is cursed and has caused no end of misery to my people, the Apache.
Again, the team wanted to capture the best feature of spaghetti westerns and realistic westerns. It blended the best elements of both, but I'd say it definitely leans much harder into the fantastical and over-the-top tropes of spaghetti westerns much more, which works best for a video game if we're being honest. If I'm not shooting Comanche off a horseback with a gold-plated Gatling gun in the back of a horse-drawn carriage, I'm not fully earning my cowboy hat, so we gotta make this do. Writer Harris Orkin said his inspirations behind the game fall primarily with Deadwood, Unforgiven, and The Wild Bunch, but plenty more also played a part into this game's overall aesthetic, such as Sergio Leone's Dollars trilogy, Once Upon a Time in the West, 310 to Yuma, and Appaloosa, but also giving a lot of credit to real-life history. Many actual outlaws of the Old West were former Confederate soldiers. They suffered the horrors and terrors of the Civil War and often lost everything they had. Real-life outlaws like Jesse James and his brothers, the Youngers, and Archie Clement. It was also kind of happenstance that this game took place during the Civil War at all. That wasn't the intentions of Techland going into the project. They wanted to tell the tale of Ray, Thomas, Juarez, and Marissa before Billy was born, and when they counted back the years, it just turned out that it was right in the midst of the Civil War. And once they made that discovery, they fully embraced it. In fact, wrapping the whole story around it. The war was a catalyst for the McCall's story. It brought out the worst in them and everyone around them, pushing them to their limits and making them face a brand new reality and seeing if they can take it. It's also super cool to see a game in the setting of the Civil War, even though it's only the first couple of levels. It's not a setting that's often seen in gaming. I mean, there's that History Channel game, I guess.
We'll be planted here till Judgment Day.
When can we get this started?
Everyone back home is counting on us. Now move!
Don't forget me.
They wanted to make sure that the story would stay as historically accurate as possible with all the elements that came with that. Even the not so pretty ones, like the white suppression of Native Americans, specifically the Apache, and how that fueled their anger towards the white devil. But also general racism and slavery of not only the Apache but other tribes like the Comanche and the Navajo, but African Americans as well as Mexicans in South Texas. The game even has a subplot that focuses on the feud between the Apaches and the Comanches at the time. They decided to embrace the truths of the time and show them for what they were, because ignoring them would be a disservice to them, much like Neversoft's approach to Gun. Video games often delve into violence, but not many of them put that violence into perspective of events that truly happened in history. A lot of that perspective in this game comes from the youngest McCall brother, William, as he constantly tries to pull his older brothers back from the bloodshed and the murdering, acting very much so as the conscience in this game, breaking the non-stop violence that is occurring every level. When it came to guns though, Techland was a little more lenient on being historically accurate, to improve the overall gameplay. During the time the game takes place, revolvers and double-barreled shotguns were still the most popular weapons in the West, but that makes for dull gameplay. Many other types of weapons were added that are all real and modeled after their historical counterparts, but maybe didn't quite belong in that time setting just yet. Sometimes the introductions of the weapons would be off by a few months, but sometimes by several years. But this is something also seen a lot in spaghetti western films. The guns complement the action better, so included they will be. It's 2009, so of course they also added a multiplayer portion of the game, and from what I understand, it was alright. But let's get into the actual gameplay of the game and see what's up.
You want to do it quietly? Right.
Bound in Blood plays just like the first one, only better in nearly every regard. Like the first game had two different protagonists depending on which level you are playing, either Ray or Billy, this game also allows you to play as two protagonists, although this time you get to pick who you want, either Ray or his brother Thomas. Ray, like in the first game, is big and beefy, he can take a couple rounds to the chest like nothing, and he's an absolute menace in any shootout, being able to throw dynamite with one hand and empty a 6-shooter with the other. No Bible this go around though, instead he's able to yoink a Gatling gun up and just walk around with it. Even trade if you ask me. He's much stronger than Thomas, usually taking the role of kicking in doors, but he isn't nearly as agile when it comes to jumping up on ledges, needing Thomas to pull him up.
Brother, help me!
Thomas plays a lot like Billy did in the first game. He's quicker and more nimble. He uses a lasso to get around, which is 1,000 times better than the lassoing in the first game. He's able to stealth a little bit using a bow or his throwing knives to take out enemies silently, but when it comes to a good old-fashioned shootout, he's able to aim down sights accurately from a further distance, making him a good rifleman, overlooking his brother running in like a tank. The stealth is not a critical part of the gameplay. In fact, there are some moments where you are told to be quiet and sneak up on enemies, so you get a little excited with your bow and arrow in your hand to do some all gillied up action, only to be spotted by a scripted moment and get swarmed by Native Americans anyway.
Oh, they spotted us.
Hurry! We must get to the path of the dead!
Instead of a cat vs mouse game like the first, no matter which brother you pick, you have the other brother still at your side during the mission. A perfect setup for co-op gameplay, but that wasn't a feature of the game for whatever reason. Instead, you get an AI brother that actually functions really well. They will straight up kill all the enemies for you if you give them enough time. The banter between the brothers is also great, constantly ragging on each other the whole time. Sometimes it's the same lines repeating after certain actions, but sometimes they catch you off guard and it's really funny.
I'm surprised my nutsack is still intact after that.
There's also the re-emergence of concentration mode from the first game, the slow-mo dead-eye mechanic that Ray used throughout the game, although in this game both brothers can use it in their own unique ways, with Ray being able to riddle markers all over any enemies in his line of sight, shooting off all of them from dual revolvers instantaneously like Jack Swift in Red Dead Revolver. Thomas, on the other hand, uses his concentration mode to do one-hit kills by automatically locking onto an enemy and flicking the mouse back to mimic fanning the hammer on the revolver. Much more conservative and efficient with ammo, but something about Ray's overkill is just fantastic.
We'll beat these bastards yet!
This game unfortunately also includes duels, and way too many of them. Pretty much any unique bad guy with voice lines will require you to duel them to finish the game, and they sucked in the first game, but are somehow even worse in this game. The only good thing about them is they look really good. The environments and the visual effects of the scene, with the tense music and the slow methodical movements waiting for the bell to ring, it's all really well done. But from an actual gameplay perspective, all of it should have been cut out. It's pretty much a glorified QuickTime event. You just have to move the mouse at the right time to the right spots in order to win. You don't actually control the crosshairs like Red Dead Revolver. Again, a game that is 5 years younger than this game doing it better. The biggest downfall in this game is that it doesn't even tell you how to duel properly. It tells you to move your mouse to the gun to draw it at the bell and to move side to side with the movement keys in order to keep your opponent centered. The problem is you need to literally have your hand mere millimeters from the gun, where the character's hand does a little twitchy thing with his fingers in order to draw fast enough. And I mean you have to draw immediately or you're dead. But if you reach too far, the character you're playing with will give you a little finger wag like, no, don't grab the gun yet, like they aren't in a standoff for their life at the moment. I died probably 15 times to the first guy you duel, and died several more times the next couple guys as well. I didn't get the hang of it until the final few chapters, and even then it would take me 5+ times to still get it right. On top of dying over and over and over again, the duel takes about 15 seconds of dancing around first before the bell actually rings. So after you die, you wait another 15 seconds to probably die again, and these moments were pretty rage-inducing. Terrible mechanic. I know dueling kinda needs to be a part of a Western game, but if you're going to require it in nearly every level, at least make it fun or teach how to use it properly. Oh man, well that was a rant. Well, while I'm at it, another stupid thing was all the screen shake that happened in the game. We get it, dynamite and booming and all that shit, but I can't see shit with this going on. Alright, that's enough of the complaints though. Everything about the game is fucking brilliant. One of the most innovative mechanics added to this game was the cover system. It's an automatic system that sort of snaps you to whatever cover you are near. Like when it works, it's brilliant. I loved it, especially as Thomas, peering over the box with your rifle, popping someone's noodle and then ducking back down to reload, or peering around doorways with your revolver trained at head level. When it worked, it was fantastic, but it didn't always work. I'd say like 95% of the time it was golden, good stuff, I enjoyed it. The other 5% is your body not knowing what surface you want to cling on to, and you end up not having your gun out or just poking your head out to get shot at for no reason. Overall, I did like it a lot though. Peeking around a corner and getting a nice clean shot just felt super satisfying. There are some creature comforts changed from the first game as well. Guns no longer break and are a permanent part of your inventory, even allowing you to get cash and buy nicer weapons to have and keep for future levels. Healing is also fully automatic as well. You don't have to pick up whiskey bottles anymore. So if you get popped too few many times, you just have to hide out for a couple seconds and you're all set, similar to Call of Duty or Halo. It keeps you in the action. Like I said earlier, there was a multiplayer feature in this game because it's 2009. Why wouldn't there be? The levels look really nice, detailed, and rather large for the amount of players that you can get on them, but I never actually played this mode and servers no longer exist for playing it today. I'm sure there's ways around it and people that actually play it. There's some YouTube videos of multiplayer games online in 2022, but I'm not going to get into all that. We're here for the single player gameplay and what goes along with that single player action. Some nice narrative to drive it all along.
Our family's homestead is in harm's way, and I'll be damned before I let Sherman's army burn it to the ground.
You have your orders. If you choose to disregard them, you will be charged as deserters.
Are you threatening me?
It ain't a threat, McCall. It's a promise.
Like I said before, the plot of this game covers so much backstory from the first game, and there is so much character building and critical moments shoved into this game. It's a pretty well written story that comes off great and is paced extremely well, but it is quite a doozy. There's a lot going on here, and I feel like getting into the nitty gritty on this one because I really enjoyed it. So buckle in for the story, or just skip ahead if you don't care, I guess. The game starts in 1864. Ray and Thomas are sergeants in the Confederate Army, currently holding Union troops outside of Atlanta in the closing moments of the Civil War. After a successful battle near the Chattahoochee River, they are instructed by their commanding officer, Colonel Barnsby, to retreat to Jonesboro to reinforce supply lines. They decided to reply to this order by saying, "Fuck you, buddy," rather boldly, and then head back to their family's home to protect it, as well as their mother and little brother waiting there from the approaching Union Army. By the time they arrive to the house though, it's already in shambles, overrun by Union soldiers, and their mother is dead. She died in the night before, with her youngest son William locked in the room with her, hiding from the Union. Now on the run from both the Union and the Confederates for desertion, the three brothers flee, vowing to come back to their home and rebuild it once the war is over. Shortly after this act of desertion, the war ends. The Confederates wave their true flag and they stop the rebellion, but Colonel Barnsby refuses to surrender and continues to hunt down the McCalls for the refusal to follow his orders, personally blaming them for allowing Atlanta to burn by deserting their position. The boys meanwhile head west to Fort Smith, Arkansas, a lawless town full of gamblers, grifters, and gunslingers, the three terrible G's, where Ray and Thomas oddly fit right in. William notices how much his brothers have changed from the war. They've become cold and violent, taking whatever they want without a care for anyone else, including the daughter of the federal marshal in town, causing him to throw down his badge and duel the brother responsible for touching his daughter. Of course, the brothers win the duel, making them all now murderers of a federal marshal, meaning that they were wanted men all across the states. So where else to go now but down south to Mexico, choosing the town of Juarez due to some rumors of an Aztec treasure, reassuring themselves that if they get the treasure, they can rebuild their family home sooner and return to their old lives.
What about our plan? Rebuilding our family farm, reclaiming our land.
That's why I want the treasure, brother. Without gold, that plan is just a fantasy.
We are given a glimpse into an Apache meeting, the chief, Running River, gathering a tribal council to declare war on the white men, planning on using the secret medallion of the ancient Aztecs to barter for guns to fight the White Devil. The medallion is the one we're familiar with from the first game. It reveals the location of the gold of Juarez. The Apaches, of course, knowing of the gold for ages, but they all steer clear of it due to the curse that lays over it. Running River wants to use this medallion anyway in order to fuel his war, sending his son, seeing farther to the south, to a people that hate the white men as well, that will gladly sell them the guns to fight. We come back to the brothers in a cantina in San Lorenzo, hanging out drunk, or getting there in Ray's case.
You're drunk.
I'm getting there.
A woman walks in the building, getting the attention of every man in the place, especially Ray, who is immediately infatuated with her. She speaks to a man who works at the cantina and then she leaves, but before she can exit, she's stopped by two men at the door, saying that their boss, Mr. Devlin, would like to see her.
He wants to see you today, senorita, in his bed, wearing nothing but a smile.
Pendejo!
She appropriately spits on the man, causing them to get aggressive, which in turn causes Ray to put a bullet in one of their heads, causing a gunfight all throughout town with the brothers and the henchmen of this Devlin character, ending in a duel with one of his hired guns who calls himself the Rattler. Needless to say, the brothers aren't really impressed by his boasting.
You killed the Jericho Kid?
So you have heard of me.
Nope.
I'll kill you before you clear leather. You hear me?
They meet up with the woman hiding out in a church, killing a few more men on their tail before a familiar face to players of the first game shows up, a man named Juan Mendoza, aka Juarez. He thanks the brothers for rescuing his woman, now revealed to be named Marissa, a name that you should also know from the first game. They decide to meet up with Juarez at his Alcazar later that night to break some bread, much to the disappointment of William, who is baffled that his brothers would spend time with a bandit like Juarez. He is also concerned with Ray's infatuation with Marissa, Juarez's girl, because Ray gets what he wants, and that's going to end badly. Mendoza briefs the McCall brothers on the men that they fought all throughout town that work for a man named Devlin, a mine operator just outside of town that is on the same pursuit for the gold of Juarez as everyone else, using his mining operation to blast holes everywhere hoping to stumble upon the riches. Juarez wants him dead and offers the brothers a deal if they take him out, a share of the lost gold. So the brothers make their way to Devlin's mine and get to work, very confident in their ability to wreak havoc on the whole thing. They fight through all the men in their way, running Devlin out of his operation and eventually cornering him on his escape. They kill his right-hand man and deny all of his offers as he begs and pleads for his life. Just as Ray is about to take him out, William shows up with the revolutionary passage from the Bible, "Thou shalt not kill."
It's a little late for that, little brother. Look around.
William continues to beg Ray to not kill the man, but Ray clearly has no plans to change his mind.
It's not too late, it's not. When our Savior was nailed to the cross, there were 2 other men crucified alongside of him, murderers. And he took one of them to heaven because that man repented. He begged for forgiveness, and he was forgiven.
The Lord forgave him?
Yes.
A cold-blooded murderer?
Yes.
Well, hell, that's good to know.
William continues to be a little rain cloud on the situation, becoming more saddened by his brother's descent into darkness, seeing not only them becoming obsessed with the gold, but also being obsessed with Marissa. Ray is head over heels for her, but it's becoming more obvious that Marissa and Thomas actually have a connection as well, a violent love triangle, or square I guess if Juarez is still involved in the picture. With Devlin dead, Juarez calls a meeting with the brothers, introducing a friend, Seeing Farther, who has come to him offering him the medallion for the guns. This will give Juarez the location of the gold for a small price of a few hundred rifles. The men all head out to Tucson, Arizona to meet a gun runner to buy the rifles. The brothers are blinded by gold and Marissa still, and William becomes acquainted with Seeing Farther, teaching each other about their own cultures. They arrive to the town, but the gun runner is jailed by the Pinkertons and he needs to be free. So the brothers get to work. They bust him out of jail and retrieve the rifles that were seized. But before the trip, Marissa approaches Ray, flirting with him, rather obviously, laying it on thick.
Yeah, those babbling brooks here in Arizona can be mighty dangerous, huh? Wouldn't want a big old snake slithering up your skirt.
How big?
Hinting to him that she wanted him to kill Juarez and take the medallion from him once he has it, making him think that she's interested in spending the rest of her life with Ray, once they get the medallion and get rich, that is. They fight through the town and reach the gunrunner being held captive. His head is bandaged and he doesn't really talk much, but he leads the brothers to the rifles before they all escape. Juarez meets with the gunrunner who is getting all of his bandages removed, discussing the terms to their deal, and in doing so, it's revealed that the Joshua Graham looking dude right here is actually Colonel Barnsby, and Juarez decides to hand over the McCall brothers in return for a better deal on his end. The brothers go to their meeting spot with Juarez and instead meet Barnsby, who ties them up and plans on lynching them for their desertion, revealing his true motivation for not stopping his pursuit. Atlanta burned to the ground after the brothers left, and his wife and his child were murdered in their beds by the Union, and he personally holds all deserters of the war responsible for that. He ends his speech by also revealing he's just mad that black people are free as well. It also seems like that part makes him a little angrier than his family being killed.
Free to do whatever they want. Fornication with our women. Miscegenation.
Colonel,
You will pay for your betrayal.
He ties up the brothers and has them ordered to be lynched. He also interrogates William to get information on why Juarez wanted rifles. He tells them it's to trade with the Apaches for a medallion that will lead him to the gold. He also reveals that the reason Juarez bought rusty old rifles from him is because he doesn't care if the rifles work, and is okay giving the busted guns to the Apache as they may not know the guns well enough to notice a bad deal. Once they are left alone though, the brothers escape. Barnsby's kind of okay with that because now he too wants the medallion, as he can fund another Confederate army and start another civil war.
The riches it promises could help us to resurrect the Confederacy. We could raise a great army and break free from the tyranny of Washington, D.C. The carpetbaggers will be driven from our land, and the darkies will be back in bondage where they belong.
The brothers eventually catch up with Juarez, and after learning that he didn't know Barnsby wanted them dead, they seem to come to peace and work together again as they head into Apache territory to do some business. On the way though, they are ambushed by the Comanche, and Seeing Farther goes missing in the night. As they battle their way through Comanche territory, finally making it to safety in Apache territory, they are confronted by the Apache, including Seeing Farther. He discovers that the guns were broken and busted, and they decide to kill Juarez and the McCalls. William steps up as a friend of Seeing Farther and spares them though. As collateral though, the Apache still takes their guns, their horses, their carriages, and Marissa, who Juarez is not quick to defend, as he believes that she's the one who told the Apaches of the broken rifles in the first place. The McCall brothers are brought into the camp to rest before heading on their way. At the camp, Seeing Farther decides to help them get the medallion anyway, because he knows his father will continue to try to use this medallion to fuel a war between the Apaches and the white men, and he does not want that for his people. He reveals the medallion has been drowned in a lake within the Navajo territory, so they are to sneak into their burial grounds and retrieve it, disgracing their holy place without any second thoughts.
Why aren't they attacking?
Well, get ready, brother.
This is a sacred place. They will not shed blood here.
Well, hell, if they won't, we will.
They grab the medallion and flee. Seeing Farther gives it to William, as the other two brothers will just kill each other to get to it. Speaking of which, the boys get into fighting in the Apache village because it's discovered that they both have the hots for Marissa, and Marissa has been leading on Ray while she secretly loves Thomas. During their scrap though, Barnsby shows up and starts bombing the Apaches, massacring most of the village and kidnapping Seeing Farther, holding him for ransom in exchange for the medallion. He tells them to meet him in the ghost town to make the trade, and of course they go in guns blazing and try to save Seeing Farther. They fail though. Barnsby kills Seeing Farther, and in his dying breath, he reveals that it was Mendoza that captured him, along with William and Marissa, who he still has captive in his Alcazar. The boys kill the rest of Barnsby's men, and they leave Barnsby to Running River, since he killed his son. Running River renounces his life of violence and declares that he will live in peace for the rest of his days, now to be known as Calm Water. Yeah, that was a good twist. However, he says that he must do one last thing as he approaches a tied up Barnsby with a knife in hand.
Running River will become calm water. I love you, my son, Shazam, and I am sorry. And there is but one last thing I must do.
Now wait a second. Just hold on. No! No!
Back at Juarez's Alcazar, he is interrogating William on how to use the medallion. His faith will not be broken though, as he just repeats Bible verses back to back. In passing, Marissa sneaks in to tell William that she is pregnant with Juarez's baby, but she's still in love with Thomas, and that she will ensure that they all make it out alive, giving him a gun to hide. Juarez, however, saw the whole conversation and uses that to break William, making him pull the gun out and use it in self-defense, killing a man in cold blood, absolutely breaking William's spirit. William still refuses to tell Mendoza how to use the medallion, so Mendoza just tells his men to kill him, shutting the door as gunshots ring out. Marissa hears this and accepts that William has been killed. She pleads for her life from Mendoza by saying that she is pregnant with his child, and uses that distraction to knock him out and take the medallion for herself and flee. The brothers are shown infiltrating the Alcazar. Thomas is wrangling horses to escape with, and he runs into Marissa fleeing, and she informs him that William is dead. She urges him to flee and leave Ray behind because she suspects that he would kill them both anyway. She says that she has the medallion and she knows how to use it, so off they go. Meanwhile, Ray is inside of the castle, and the gunshots Juarez heard wasn't William getting shot, it was Ray shooting all of his men and saving his brother. Ray and William flee in underground tunnels that lead into caverns where they are eventually confronted by Juarez, and he reveals to Ray that Thomas and Marissa have run off, betraying him and getting the gold for themselves. And this fight ends in a duel, of course. Ray wins the duel, but in the waters of the cavern, Juarez's body is never found. Ray and William keep running to the crypt where the gold is. Ray all hyped up on Mountain Dew after killing like 700 people, and he's blinded by rage of betrayal from Mendoza, from Marissa, and most importantly, Thomas. Ray is going to kill his brother, so William steps in the middle of them, deciding to become a martyr. He pretends to pull out a gun on Ray, causing Ray to shoot him, and it turns out all he was pulling out was a Bible, and William lays dead on the ground. At this point, Barnsby also shows up. He wasn't scalped, stopped by Running River. Instead, he was cut free in Running River's first act of peace and becoming calm water. So Barnsby has been following their trail ever since. The crypt of gold rapidly starts crumbling and filling with sand for some reason. The brothers have one final battle with their former colonel and finally realize that maybe the gold of Juarez is actually cursed, so they all leave it behind. In William's sacrifice, Ray found the Lord and devoted his life to him, putting away his guns forever. Well, at least for 17 years. He became the preacher that William always wanted to be, and he's the one that joined Thomas and Marissa in marriage, no longer holding any grudge to either of them. The ending cutscene shows a large belly on Marissa and a medallion around her neck, the true foundation for the first game, ending this story here. The thing I loved most about this story was the characters. The McCalls start the game with a strong sense of family, deciding fighting for their family is way more important than whatever the Confederate States stand for. And the game stays true to the title of the series, the Call of Juarez, the Curse of the Gold. Anyone who seeks that out goes mad, and that falls true for the McCall brothers. Ray is the star of the show. He is constantly drunk, wanting to kill or have sex with something, polar opposite to the Ray that we knew from the first game. And that's the brilliance of his character arc that spans across the course of the two games. He goes from Confederate soldier to despicable outlaw to devout man of God, again falling back into a filthy gunslinger after his brother Thomas's death, and again seeking redemption for his actions and ultimately sacrificing his life for his nephew Billy, much like his younger brother William did. Thomas and Marissa are sort of a mixed bag. On one hand, Thomas seems like the more level-headed brother, still just as violent and cold-hearted as Ray, but he's more of a follower of Ray than a true man himself. And this doesn't really align with the impression that we get of him in the first game. We never see him aside from his corpse, but Billy describes his stepfather as a drunk, abusive bastard who beats him and his mother. Of course, people change, and even before they started chasing the gold, the brothers were on a path of darkness due to being hardened by the horrors of the Civil War. So it's entirely possible Thomas coped more with alcohol over the years and turned into this monster Billy describes him as. Ray too is cold and bitter even as a reverend. He is a devout man of God, but people he still has no love for in his heart. As the events of the first game goes to show, he just loves his brother. Marissa is another character that shocked me. We never really see her in the first game, again aside from her corpse, but I did not expect her to be so cold-hearted, just as the McCalls. It makes sense though. She wasn't in the war, but she still describes growing up being used by her stepfather and countless other men, eventually getting with Juarez and having him be abusive to her as well. She is hardened to the world, so when it came to flirting with Ray while falling in love with Thomas, it just came easy for her. She wanted Juarez dead, and she wanted to use the gold to get rich and live a happy life with Thomas. And if Ray happened to get killed in the process, she really didn't care. Not what I expected, but it's really well done in my opinion. Juarez is pretty much the same character in both games, a selfish narcissist who will kill anyone in his path for the gold. He gladly offers up Marissa to the Apache. He gets his own men killed on purpose to prove a point. He has no loyalty, and he is the perfect example of the effects of the Call of Juarez, which is maybe why he is named after it as well. I thought it was dumb how they handled the duel with him in the game though. Like, why even have the duel if he's just gonna mysteriously disappear after getting shot? Why not just have him just flee away? We know as the player that he doesn't die, so why waste our time with another stupid fucking duel that doesn't end in any sort of closure? Running River's transition into calm water also took me off guard. I did not see that coming, but that added such depth to the Apache storyline that could have just been simply some filler for the game. I really enjoyed the game's story. I played this whole thing in one day, and while I loved the combat of each level, aside from the duels, it was actually the story that kept me going. The twists and the turns, the masked gun runner ending up as Barnsby, Ray saving William in the Alcazar, all portrayed wonderfully, and honestly I loved it. The general public seemed to like it as well. It's received slightly better reviews than the first game. Most people found it superior to the first game in every way, but most people like myself adoring especially the plots and the gunplay, being praised as an excellent shooter with terrific production values. Honestly, most of the reviews seem to knock the lack of co-op and the short campaign that runs about 6 to 7 hours, and it kind of makes you put critic reviews in perspective. When a score comes to 8 out of 10 and those are are the only negatives. Bound in Blood also sold better than the first game. It sold almost 50,000 copies across all consoles in the first week, rising to number 4 bestseller in the UK in the month of its release. And in just a couple months, the game sold 900,000 units across all platforms, making it one of Ubisoft's best-selling titles of the year, competing with the likes of Tom Clancy's Hawks, Anno 1404, and Assassin's Creed 2. Call of Juarez had a strong start as a franchise, but as someone who has only played the first 2 games, I can confidently say that Bound in Blood is the best game so far, and it's not even close. Call of Juarez is like a 6 out of 10, and Bound in Blood is an 8.5 at the very least. I'm hesitant to score it too high right now because I've heard fantastic things about Gunslinger, but I plan to get to that one as well after going through the Cartel to see how all the games stack up to each other. The Cartel was a mistake. That isn't a quote from a critic or an angry YouTuber. That is the words of the CEO of Techland, the studio that made the game. He added, "It wasn't a bad game, but it wasn't finished when we released it." In fact, when Techland wanted to gain their rights to the games from Ubisoft in 2018, they didn't even take this game, essentially leaving it in gaming limbo, as it's the only game not available anywhere on digital markets right now. A month before the game was released, IGN published an article literally titled, "The Cartel Should Be Delayed," essentially bashing the game for not being done. If only Ubisoft and Techland listened.
Give me a fucking break, SE.
The Cartel is the third game in the series Call of Juarez, released in 2011 for the PC, the Xbox 360, and the PlayStation 3. The Cartel is a standalone story in the series, and while there are nods to the prior games with Ben's ancestry, the Gold of Juarez being mentioned for all of 3 minutes, and some familiar locations like City of Juarez, the Ghost Town, and Mendoza's Alcazar, it is an entirely new story, full of drug movie or crime drama cliches. Imagine the movie SWAT in game form, with 1/10 of the depth in a script. And the story branches into 3 different endings, after beating the game with all 3 characters, which I doubt anyone ever has. Oh, actually 1% of players out there have. The torture that you achievement hunters put yourselves through. The characters are Ben McCall from LAPD Homicide, Kim Evans from the FBI, and Eddie Guerra from the DEA. These 3 musketeers create the interagency dream team to investigate the cartel, enacting a war on drugs. But it quickly morphs into some sort of political conspiracy or some shit, and it's honestly kinda hard to follow. It's still a Western game per the developers, but instead of rustlers and bandits, the new outlaw is the Mendoza Cartel, a very real terror on both American and Mexican soil, even though Techland states that this game has no basis in real life. As a Polish game studio, I don't think Techland actually put any sort of time or efforts into researching the real-life situation of the cartel or the political relations between countries to try and stop them. There is no actual representation of the horrors of the cartel in the game. You get the occasional news broadcasts of politicians screaming about starting a war or building a wall, but the cartel is treated like any nameless street gang and not the absolutely terrifying presence that they actually are. They kill civilians, they kill journalists and politicians and string them up as warnings to not document their crimes against humanity. They torture families, women, and children to get what they want. They are an unchecked presence in Mexico, and even today, they are a consistent threat that the government just cannot deal with. I'm pretty sure the Mexican military is not as well armed or funded as the cartel. It is a terrifying thing, and this game wastes any opportunity to shine a light on this and have some sort of compelling storyline, but instead it's just cartel bad. The leader of the Mendoza cartel is blasted to bits by a UAV rocket simply to cover up some blackmail from a director in the FBI, just casually ending this massive force like nothing so you don't lose your job. I can't blame Techland too hard. How many game studios make games about any sort of conflict over history and it just boils down to these people being bad? You should kill them. You are the good guy. Whether it's Nazis or Taliban, game studios don't often dive into deeper representation on these things. So why should Techland when it comes to the cartel? Actually, they do go into sex trafficking that occurs, only they showed it backwards. American girls aren't typically kidnapped and trafficked into Mexico. It is overwhelmingly the other way around. I guess you can't win them all.
You want to thank me?
How about Thursday? Maybe she wants to thank me too. I helped save her sister's ass.
Techland was challenged during the development of Bound in Blood. People kept asking whether the traditional Western was still relevant in modern times. They thought the Wild West values were universal and could be effortlessly brought into a modern setting. The Cartel was their attempt at proving it. They wanted to make fans of the Western series happy, but also wanted to try to appeal to a new audience with a generic first-person shooter that everyone else was making. And this is after Rockstar released Red Dead Redemption 1 year prior, making Westerns cool again, and to ditch the theme at this time is just terrible. Of course, the locations were different. They did dive into some of the same places in the prior games, like the ghost town in Colorado and Juarez City in Mexico, one still being abandoned and the other now a thriving city. The changes to Juarez were actually pretty neat, and I wish it emphasized everything a little bit more. Is this the graveyard that Billy helped bury a man in the first game? Is this the church where Ray and Thomas held off Devlin's men saving Marissa? And is this the cantina where they were all getting drunk when they first laid eyes on her? It's not made clear, but I like to think it is. And it's those moments that I really appreciate. As far as the characters go, Techland went with the idea of multiple protagonists, same as the last two games, but instead of swapping the player character every chapter or so, they decided to offer 3 possible protagonists to play as, but you have to play the whole game as that character, with the other 2 being AI partners. The 3 characters are Ben, a spiritual successor to Ray McCall, badass cop, war veteran, cynical, bitter, and driven by vengeance. Eddie, a smooth talker, a gambler, a DEA agent always ready to make a buck, and Kim, who is a rising star within the FBI and just learning how the real world works. She also has a dark past that she tries to hide in order to continue rising within the FBI. With the decision of having 3 characters, there was of course a strong focus on multiplayer co-op. So strong, in fact, it's a detriment to the single player experience. Lots of mechanics in the game were made for co-op gameplay in mind. Flanking, breaching, the secret side objectives, all focused on having a real life person or 2 playing with you and not 2 AI computers. For the single player version of the game, the story is slightly different for each protagonist, but like I said, you cannot swap between characters between each mission. You are stuck with one character all the way through, meaning that you have to play the game through 3 complete times to get the full experience of the story and every perspective of the game. Techland and its creative team were actually all the same members on this game as they were in prior titles of the series, so it's even more baffling that this product ended up as drastically different. I think there was definitely some great thoughts and care put into the ideas of the game, but unfortunately, as the tale of game development goes, the publisher, Ubisoft, probably put a lot of requirements and restrictions on the team rather than give them the creative freedom to make a great game. And the game could have ended up great. It's not the premise or the idea of the game that makes it bad, but more so the execution of the whole thing. And that could be attributed to the severe crunch hours on Techland to get this game out, and the game simply wasn't done. And they were all mindless zombies at the end, making mistakes and ultimately making a bad game. And they all had the intentions of making a really good game, but crunch just killed them. Some developers actually spent time with gangs of LA and Mexico to get a sense of the life, so I bet offering some deeper perspective on the outlaw side of the story was intended, but not really seen in the final product. As far as narrative inspirations, they structured themselves after some shows that could be considered modern westerns in theme, like Sons of Anarchy and The Shield, and I think that definitely shines through in some of the early 2010s edgelord dialogue.
How much? What are you trying to say, man?
We know Don Levy gave you the key. Just saw it happen.
Whose motherfucking side are you on? What was I supposed to do, man? One of you's talking internal affairs about me, you see. I don't know who the fuck to trust. Definitely not that bitch.
What?
Techland also knocked it out of the park with the Chrome engine. It is still impressive as ever. This game using the 5th iteration of it that is also used in other games like Dead Island, its spin-off Riptide, as well as the last game in the Call of Juarez series, Gunslinger. According to Techland, some levels, like the one that takes place in a packed nightclub, uses more assets than the entirety of Bound in Blood, which was on Chrome Engine 4, the prior version. It's a shame that assets don't make the game good. You can tell that developers of the game weren't happy with the game when doing release interviews, but there was only so much they can do. They were pushed to put the game out as is, but at the end of the day, it's still Techland's name on the line, and especially so when their creative leaders are telling the fans to trust them as they slap some shit on their plate.
What would you say to Call of Juarez fans who were not so happy with the decision to make the game modern and sort of urban?
You should trust us.
But that's enough of discussing what built up this mess of a game. Let's talk about actually playing this thing. At the start of the game, you can pick any of the 3 characters to control, and the other 2 will be AI, or co-op if you played this back when servers were live. Each of the characters has slightly different abilities. McCall reloads revolvers quickly, Guerra can dual wield SMGs, and Evans has even better aiming with long-range weapons. The standard weapon loadouts for the 3 characters are also slightly different. For the most part, the 3 characters control about the same though. I have to admit, I only played this game once, so I only know how the game really plays as Ben, as do most that played the game. 12% of players beating the game as Ben, more than the other 2 characters combined. And I know what you're thinking, combined, that is 22% of players beating the game, not accounting for the people that played through it as multiple characters. But when you see that only 50% of players beat the first chapter, it makes everything seem a little bit more reasonable. No one really liked this game. Apparently, different characters offer different cutscenes as well as endings to the game, but I don't think it changes the story in any substantial way. There are moments when you're playing as Ben and you get a phone call and you notice that your compadres also got a phone call at the same time, so you're all just standing around on the phone talking to different people, but you can only hear your conversation obviously. I can't possibly imagine that I'm really missing much in the other storylines.
So I'd like to start off with some cheese pizza. 1 order of cheese pizza. One pepperoni pizza.
The dialogue of the game is typical edgy shit, but written from the perspective of what a middle schooler thinks sounds cool or badass. Your AI counterparts will constantly rattle off 3 different phrases the entire game. 1 second they're bashing you for bad aim, the other they're telling you not to kill everyone so fast, and it's a constant back and forth of recycled dog shit. They also try and communicate where enemies will be by just shouting left or behind, and 9 times out of 10 there's no one there, because I already killed them 30 seconds ago. It's like they aren't voicing these directions on actual enemies being there, but on the scripted time that enemies are supposed to be there. So if I was just faster on the gun and sprinting ahead to get out of this torture, then I had already killed them. But that doesn't mean Kim isn't still gonna shout a random direction at me when I'm done. And that's not even counting the cringe cutscene dialogue.
DEA!
FBI!
Let me see your hands!
Hey, Flaco. Sorry for the cock block.
Date's over, mamacita.
Overall, the AI is shit, clearly an afterthought, as the developers intended for the game to be played with 3 real people in an online setting, which admittedly would have probably been a whole lot more fun. But the bare bones AI they left to us lonely folk in single player is just ridiculous. The only saving grace there is that they cannot be killed, so you don't have to worry about failing any levels because you didn't babysit them enough. But let's talk about the actual gameplay when it comes to a first-person shooter. The shooting. This is what I had hoped for going into the game. I heard the game was buggy, I heard the plot was non-existent, and the dialogue was cringe, but I had hopes that this game would at least be a fairly entertaining time to run around and shoot people in. It's not. It's probably some of the worst shooting that I've experienced in a game, and I've played 25 to life. Let's start with some good. The gun models look great, and there's a solid variety of pistols, SMGs, and rifles to choose from, even though on a functional standpoint, they all feel entirely the same. The animations are pretty nice, but they are just recycled from Techland's Dead Island, so is that even really a plus for this game? They are modern guns, so no more Winchesters and 6-shooters, but the game would have been better with them. I mean, Ben is holding a double-barreled shotgun on the cover of the game, and that shit's not even in the game. Instead, you get your choice of 3 different pump-action shotguns that lack the punch of a video game shotgun. I have never used a less satisfying shotgun in gaming. They are always the guns that make a presence and make you feel the power of them, but in this game, they are just bad. I had one cool moment with them in my 5-hour run with Ben. 1. Compare that to Gunslinger, the next game in the series where the shotguns feel amazing, but really all the guns just don't feel good in this game. Some weapons have too much recoil, some weapons have no recoil at all, and for a game that is a by-the-books first-person shooter, I feel like the shooting should have been more well done, but it's just not. Bound in Blood was 10 times as satisfying, and every single shooter that came out around this time of the Cartel just blows it out of the water. The guns feel imprecise and floaty. It's hard to tell when you actually hit an enemy, especially when they are behind cover. In Bound in Blood, you can shoot an enemy's leg or an arm that is poking out around the cover and they'll stumble out. In this game, I feel like I hit people in the head and the shot doesn't even register. During the flanking portions, there is constant automatic fire from people blind firing from behind cover. It's nearly impossible to see them. You have to take part in this flanking activity to get around their cover and kill them instead of tactfully shooting their arm or something. I've also never played a game that didn't reward headshots. There's no gratifying screen flash like Max Payne or sound effect or hit marker or any indication of a headshot, which isn't really a deal breaker to me, but what is upsetting is that it seems like gun damage doesn't even change depending on where you hit somebody. It takes the same amount of shots no matter where you hit them, so I just constantly aim center mass for the majority of the game. This in turn makes choosing which weapon to use a non-argument. While I wanted to try the FAL and the pistols a little bit more throughout the game, I tended to always float back towards the AK or the M4, or in later levels the RPK and the M60 once I unlocked them, simply because they had the largest ammo capacity and made spray and pray gunplay much easier. When precision doesn't matter, why not just keep the 100-round drum in hand? The enemies are also all cookie cutter gangsters, no variation. You fight the same enemies the entire game, and they don't even have any cool ragdoll effects that made shooters of this time fun to play. They just crumple down, even with the shotgun. So this boils down to the entire game being unsatisfying shooting with unsatisfying guns at unsatisfying enemies for the whole game, only to be broken up by 3 special mechanics. 1. Concentration mode, which is yet another downgrade from the prior games. Time simply slows down and you can precisely take out enemies. 100 games have done this and 100 games have done it better. I'm tying this together with door breaching because it's just kicking in a door before using concentration mode. Typical Call of Duty door breach shit. Double that with Ben saying the same 3 terrible lines every single time you activate it. Some sort of Bible quote with a fuck thrown in for good edgy measure. I guess he's channeling his grampy Ray McCall in these moments.
I will make mine arrows drunk with blood, and my sword shall devour flesh, and I will bathe in the blood of my motherfucking enemies.
Guess that's all of them.
2. Flanking. This little mechanic had some potential. You are suppressed under heavy gunfire and you move from cover to cover as your team lays down fire back at the enemy until you reach a point adjacent to the enemies and take them all out from a flank. This was a neat idea and it of course was not as polished as it could have been, but I didn't hate it. But I did hate number 3. Driving. Nearly every level involves some sort of driving. I guess it was their idea of the modern horseback riding to get to a new area. What they failed to do though was to make it fun in single player. You see, in single player you are forced to drive and you cannot shoot while you drive. So what do? You drive around getting shot at for 5 minutes at a time, sometimes dying, and there's nothing you can do about it. You have to rely on your AI teammates to shoot the enemy, which they are hit or miss at. In co-op at least you have a real person shooting for you, or you get to shoot and they drive. But in single player, these sections were nonsensical. I don't understand how that made it through playtesting. Why not let the AI drive in these levels? They even coded that in. The AI does drive once and you get to shoot out of the window once, but the 7 or 8 other times you are forced into a driving section, you are stuck behind the wheel doing nothing but being useless. You don't even have to drive well. If you crash or otherwise lose the target, don't worry your little heart because the leader of the cartel will patiently wait for you in his Hummer to catch up before hitting mock Jesus again, just trying to get away from you. It was overwhelmingly the worst part of the game. Every time I was forced into driving a car, I wanted to play in traffic. These 3 things broke up the shitty shooting in the game, and at least in the driving sections, I'd rather just keep shooting. There is also secret agendas in each level as well, where you get a phone call, in Ben's case from a hooker or something, then they say something along the lines of, hey, this guy stole my purse, or this chick owes me money, so now you have a side objective to do in these levels, and this gets you points that unlock more weapons. Hooray for new weapons. While doing these side objectives though, you have to dodge your AI teammates because you are tampering with evidence or whatever, which makes no fucking sense. All 3 of you are dirty as fuck. In the first level of the game, you're burning a weed farm and tagging a rival gang's tag all over while wearing Obama masks. Why would they actually care about you nabbing some asshole's wallets? Well, they do. I don't see how this works in multiplayer co-op either. Why would you ever want to bust your partner for stealing stuff? Don't you want them to have better guns to shoot the enemy with? It just makes no fucking sense. Every level is the same shit. Driving to a location, talking to someone or each other, a series of shitty gunfights that spill over into multiple settings, and then ending in a car chase. Same formula repeated about 15 times, with some exceptions. Sometimes you have to shoot down a helicopter or something. It's really riveting stuff.
Nice.
I'm not usually one to bash on technical problems in my videos, but there are a few things that stood out to me that I feel are worth mentioning. For one, audio quality is absolutely shit. For a game made by a company this competent, the audio sounds like it was recorded in a porta potty on a work site.
Yeah, that's worked out well.
Enough. This interagency bullshit has got to stop.
And not only is the quality bad, but there are segments where audio is clipped pretty obviously.
Hey baby, you want a party? Talking to you, man. Fuck you, bitch. You don't talk to me like that. Hey, baby. You want a party?
Audio and cutscenes I can forgive, but the writing in this game is utterly obnoxious. The edgy, over-the-top tough guy act from pretty much every character is just tiresome. I get that maybe this stuff was cool back in 2011, but man, it's just cringe today. Plus, they misquote the fucking Colombian cartel saying. I don't know if it was intentional to distance themselves from the real cartel, or if it was just carelessness on Techland's part, but it is plato o plomo, silver or lead. This game interchanges that with gold. I don't know why, but it really irked me.
Either or, gold or lead. Oro o la chingada.
Plata o plomo. Ustedes eligen.
There are also several things in this gameplay that aren't easily ignored. I never shot down one myself, but I swear this is not how helicopters explode. When cars outrun you in the chase sequences, they kind of just wait for you to catch up, and then they peel out when you get back up to them, and I'm pretty sure that Hummer just did a bunny hop. When you are getting burned by fire as Ben, the screaming voice doesn't even match him. Sometimes it's a female scream. It's hilariously mismatched.
Let's get them before they get us.
Here we are at the plot to this game, and not surprisingly, this shit is shallow. The game begins with a backstory of a bombing done by the Mendoza cartel at the DEA offices in Los Angeles, killing 7 federal agents. And this is taken as an act of war, and a task force is assembled to infiltrate the cartel. A task force of 3 agents from 3 different agencies. From the DEA is Eddie, from the FBI is Kim, and from the LAPD is Ben. And while it may seem odd that a detective from the LAPD is involved in something this high up, he is personally related to one of the agents killed in the bombing, Patrick Stone, as well as one of the prime suspects of pulling off the bombing, Antonio Alvarez, since all 3 of them served together in the Vietnam War. Stone was in an active investigation of the sale of military-grade weapons to the cartel, and after the bombing, Stone's daughter, Jessica, contacted Ben, telling him that her father was threatened by Alvarez to stop several days before the bombing occurred, so the motive is there. The group starts their attack on the Mendoza cartel by shoving a stick into a spider's nest, as they say. They head up to the Sequoia National Park to a secret marijuana farm owned by a gang called the Vato Locos, and the DEA has known about this for a while, and they decide to burn down this farm and blame it on a rival gang called the Araña, or Spider in English. They double down after this by trashing a trap house owned by an LA gang called the Rolling 50s, again blaming the Araña. Essentially, they are stirring up street gangs to all be at arms with each other and halting any dealing of the cartel's drugs. They then go from drugs to a little higher up on the radar to sex trafficking. Ben has a thing for ladies of the night, and some of his girls have gone missing. They find out the owner of one of the strip clubs is stealing dancers and shipping them down to Mexico. So the trio put a stop to this operation as well.
Jesus, it stinks in here.
I can't believe they crammed them all in here.
They stumbled upon a deal that finally connects them to the actual cartel members. Araña is exchanging cash with the cartel, and the team intercepts it as they suspect Alvarez will be present. And he is, but it is of course not that easy and he escapes. But the team doesn't acquire their cash, and this may have been corrupted by Kim because she was informed during the mission that Alvarez is actually an undercover FBI agent and is not to be arrested. From here they also start to move Jessica Stone around as they feel she is unsafe, and in the process find out that she was contacted by former FBI agents named Kevin Donlevy that has something to give to her that was her father's. They arrange a meetup on a rooftop bar, but he is killed. In Ben's story, you assume Alvarez killed him, but if you play as Kim, then you know that she was given the order to kill him because she is told Donlevy was a part of the cartel. Jessica goes missing in the chaos. From here, the team gets some info that Jesus Mendoza, the son of Juan Mendoza, the leader of the Mendoza cartel, is coming to Los Angeles to handle an arms deal with a private military arms dealer named Peacekeepers International, run by a man named Michael Duke. They raid a strip club where Jesus is supposed to be, and they successfully kidnap him, finding out where the deal is to be done with Duke. Eddie disguises himself as Jesus, and the group goes to the deal, but Duke backs out, saying that he now wants the gold of Juarez in exchange for the guns, the gold being on display in a museum in these modern times. The group also finds out that Jessica is captured by the cartel, and there is an agreement to trade Jesus for the girl, but at the meetup someone shoots them both, killing them. This just gets crazy and it just really rolls out of control, so I'm just gonna speed through this. I'm sure no one really cares. In Jessica's dying breath, she reveals that she got the key from Donlevy that opens a safe with a recorded message from her father Patrick that explains in detail how corrupt the US government is, saying that the coordinator of the team, Dixon, is actually working with the cartel. Alvarez calls and wants to set up a new deal. He wants the team to give him the money that they stole in exchange for the location of the new gun deal between Duke and the cartel. They agree, so the team heads to Juarez, Mexico, specifically the fort used by Juan Mendoza in prior games, where they kill all of the men on both the cartel and the peacekeeper side and steal the weapons that they were trading there as well as the money. Alvarez then manipulates Duke and Juan Mendoza against each other, causing a war at Juan's mansion, and the trio of Ben, Eddie, and Kim show up in the chaos as well to attempt to arrest Juan and get his testimony and convict all the corrupt government agents, Dixon included. Duke is killed in a helicopter crash after he attacks the group, and his men seem to fizzle out. Upon confronting Juan, he immediately surrenders, but shortly after, he's killed by a UAV drone strike to the face, and then the rest of the group is targeted after that. Dixon is trying to cover up her tracks and kill everyone involved so she doesn't, get arrested for conspiring with the cartel. The last person left alive that can testify against Dixon is Alvarez, and he is cornered at the end of the game by the group, and due to personal reasons, Ben wants him dead, because he did some war crimes in Vietnam or some shit, but he must stay alive in order to convict the greater evil. From here, there are 4 different endings depending on who you are playing as. There is 1 good ending and 3 unique bad ones. 1 per character. To get the good ending, no matter which character, you just have to choose to not kill Alvarez and to take him in alive. This leads to Dixon's arrest. Eddie also gets arrested. He's being investigated for leaking Jessica's location and ultimately getting her killed. And Kim gets arrested and gets investigated for the death of Donlevy because she shot him at the rooftop bar. Ben is off scot-free, and the game ends with him visiting Patrick and Jessica's grave and taking out a Bible to read, I guess referencing back to Ray McCall again. The 3 bad endings all start the same. You decide to kill Alvarez, which also means you decide to kill your teammates for whatever greedy reason each character has. Alvarez always escapes in every scenario, so he never dies. If you're playing as Ben, you want to kill Alvarez because of the war crimes that he committed in Nam. But of course, Alvarez gets away, and after killing the rest of his team, Ben is then seen in prison watching a news report that the government is deciding to invade Mexico to issue a war on the cartel due to the corruption of its government, and he also gets threatened by his cellmates there because he's an LAPD cop in LA County Prison. He also gets a postcard from Alvarez saying happiness is having friends in high places. If you're playing as Eddie, he decides to kill Alvarez and his teammates in order to take all of the money of the cartel and start up a new life for himself. He is shown in a hotel room with a girl and he's living his best life, but an assassin shows up on his balcony, killing them both, as a press conference with Dixon is shown on TV. She praises the team for destroying the cartel and she returns to her office, getting a call from the president praising her actions and receiving the same postcard from Alvarez, saying the same thing as in Ben's ending. And if you're playing as Kim, she kills her teammates kind of as self-defense to stop them from killing her and killing Alvarez, obviously, and taking the money. So she kills them anyway. And as shown at a press conference held by Dixon, she praises the group for crushing the cartel, and she cites the brave sacrifices of Ben and Eddie and hails the surviving Kim, giving her the FBI Medal of Honor. And in response, Kim punches her in the face on the stage, getting herself arrested. Dixon runs to her office and is greeted again with the same postcard from Alvarez. I feel like the bad ending for Kim is actually one of the best endings. Like, I feel like most justice is gonna come of that. Because, I mean, she punched the FBI director on national TV, there's obviously gonna be an investigation, and Dixon might get arrested for conspiring with the cartel. I mean, I guess Ben didn't need to die, but Eddie was the dirtiest one out of all of them, so he needed to die. So, I don't fucking know. All the endings suck. The story sucks. Once the game opened with a terrible highway shootout, like they chose to open the game that way, this is what they wanted to use you to get you hyped up for the game. I knew that it was going to be shit, and so did 50% of players of this game. Overall, the game is a boring shooter. Has a simple checkpoint system with health regeneration, the guns suck, the enemies are all the same. It's a game designed for co-op, so a lot of the missions suck in single player, especially the driving portions. All the environments are generic and lackluster. They could be in any single game at that time. There's nothing unique about them. The main characters are terrible. You don't like them at all. They all don't like each other, and by the end of the game, you don't really care what happened to anybody. They are just all miserable. Ben lives up to Ray's legacy with the McCall name. He is an absolute asshole and does terrible things, choking strippers, helping hookers with side jobs in exchange for favors, killing innocents in the line of duty. But he has some deep-rooted morals. He is faithful to his war buddy. He tried his best to keep his daughter safe, and when he sniffs out corruption up the chain of command, he sets his mind on correcting it, even if the vision may be cloudy with a little bit of personal vendettas across the way. He's also scared of heights, which I thought was a charming little throwback to Bound in Blood, where Ray is terrified on the mining platforms.
I'm sorry, brother, but I'm just not too good with heights. Fuck. I have acrophobia.
Fear of heights? Are you fucking kidding me?
But overall, the characters were all terrible. There was a part where the three cops take turns beating a man to death in the middle of the highway, and I thought that was one of the most realistic parts of the game, you know? Typical LAPD shit. The game tries its hardest to continue to be a western. Ben wears a cowboy hat for some reason, and the game really tries to force dual-wielding revolvers onto you, like an old-school gunslinger. But when breaching doors, it's better if you have a semi-automatic pistol because you get more shots in slow-mo before you have to reload. The 5.7 is actually the best gun to use. It has like a 20-round magazine, and it makes door breaching a breeze. This game just didn't do anything right. I completely understand all of the criticisms on every point. Nothing about this game was fun or entertaining, and it's really sad because I wanted to like this game.
Who the fuck are you?
The police.
Techland had to be very careful when discussing the cartel. They weren't glorifying the cartel in any way, but of course plenty of outlets thought otherwise, and as a result, the game was banned in many places like Chihuahua, Mexico. But it all boils down to the same video games cause violence arguments that hold no water. Yes, the cartel is a shitty game, but it's not responsible for any kid picking up a gun and trying to be a gangster. Lorenzo Barraza, a youth worker who lives in Ciudad Juarez, where the game takes place briefly, said lots of kids say they want to be a hitman because they are the ones that get away with everything. And that sucks. That's terrible that kids in your community are saying that. But what the fuck does that have to do with Call of Juarez, the cartel? You don't play as a hitman? There are no hitmen. I guess aside from the guy in Eddie's ending, I guess. And no one gets away with anything in the game. The ending is actually very finite on most of these characters. The main characters are all cops and they're all in cuffs at the end. Perhaps you need to point your anger towards Agent 47. Ciudad Juarez is one of the most violent cities in the world, with a murder rate of roughly 8 people every single day. That violence has spilled over into the US as well. Since 2010, at least 40 people from El Paso, Texas, which is directly north of Ciudad Juarez, have been killed while visiting. The jailer for El Paso County Sheriff's Office was killed in 2010 in Ciudad Juarez. That also killed his wife and unborn child, and that's terrible. It really is. But again, it's being blamed on the wrong things. The El Paso County Sheriff's Office, Commander Gomencito Sergio Lopez bashes the Call of Juarez game, saying that it glorifies these criminals as heroes, same as the narco songs and gangster rap, something that the game, again, does not do. The Cartel is just one of those games that received a beating by video game violence advocates simply because of the name The Cartel. No one cares about the subject of the game. It's a video game, which means Little Jimmy has it, and Little Jimmy in the game is working for Pablo Escobar, sniffing kilometers of coke and blasting hookers with automatic military firearms. Buzzwords, buzzwords, buzzwords. Ban the game, save the kids. James Portnow of the YouTube channel Extra Credits heavily criticized the game, calling it a disgrace to game design, bringing attention to the achievement called Bad Guy that requires you to kill 40 bad guys in a level where the only bad guys are black gang members, and it's the only level where you're rewarded for killing a certain amount of people. He also criticizes the portrayal of sex trafficking in the game and how inaccurate it is to real life, something that I talked about a little earlier in the video. What can I really say? Critics and players alike just hated this game. There were some redeeming qualities with the co-op mode, the potential of a secret agenda mechanic, and the music was pretty nice, but the rest of the game just sucked. If you want to go through and nitpick the criticisms, you can. It had poorly implemented game mechanics, a cliche storyline, cringy middle school dialogue, no character development, shitty audio quality, incorrect subtitles, tone-deaf racial and gender stereotypes, poor graphics and animations, full of bugs, and lack of quality control when looking at the single-player portion of the game, with designs clearly focused on co-op gameplay. Due to game critics having no spines, some of them still gave the game decent scores, like 6 out of 10 from Eurogamer and GameSpot, but some game reviewers actually having the balls to speak their mind, like Jim Sterling from Destructoid, giving it a 2.5 out of 10, and PlayStation Lifestyle giving it an abysmal 1 out of 10. I wish more critics actually used the 1 to 10 scale, because in Eurogamer's eyes, their 6 out of 10 is pretty much a 0, but they are too chicken shit to actually give a 0. In conclusion, this game sucks. It was really bad, and it's by far the worst in the series, and probably one of the worst games I've ever covered on this channel. And it really has no redeeming qualities in my eyes. After the release of Call of Juarez The Cartel, Techland had two options. Let the series die and put a large focus into their new favorite genre being zombie games, or give the series the swan song that it deserves with Gunslinger. Turns out they made the right choice, because this is often regarded to as the best game in the series and even one of Techland's best titles overall. So today, let's take some time to talk about the redemption of Call of Juarez Gunslinger.
It's time to settle up.
Mere months after the Cartel was released, publisher Ubisoft sent an email out to Uplay owners of the game asking a couple little questions. They asked for their favorite game in the series and how they'd rate the Cartel itself. But aside from that dumpster fire, they also asked the players which type of set pieces they'd like to see in an upcoming, as of yet unannounced game of the series, giving options of things like hunting an outlaw in the Rocky Mountains or preventing outlaws from pillaging a gold mine. Almost a year later, they updated their Facebook page with an image of a cowboy seated at a bar, officially announcing Gunslinger 1 day later. Ultimately, Gunslinger would release in May of 2013, a brief 2 years after the Cartel. It only came out as a digital title on the PlayStation Store, Xbox Arcade, and various platforms on PC like Steam and Uplay. As far as its relation to the series as a whole, it was even less related to the prior games than the Cartel was. It pretty much only has the name and the Western theme to it. This game is known for its fantastic shooting and its narrative structure, with the story of the game being narrated by a man named Silas Greaves, a bounty hunter of the West during the second half of the 19th century. Very similar to the game Bastion, Silas is a great narrator and storyteller, but the lines of fact and fiction are often stumbled over like a drunk man leaving a saloon. Referencing real-life outlaws of the West like Billy the Kid, Jesse James, and Butch Cassidy, but maybe embellishing his encounters with them just a little bit. But it's not just the stories and shooting, it's the great graphics and the art style and the killer voice acting that really sell this game as an overall smooth and solid experience that is more than enough to wash down the stagnant gutter water that was the Cartel. Overall, this game is fantastic. It's short and sweet with a lot of replay value that I highly recommend. With that being said, there will be a lot of spoilers for the entire game in this video, and if you have any interest in playing this game at all, I suggest you stop this video and you go shoot some outlaws. You can even use my handy dandy GOG affiliate link to get 75% off with my code that's on the screen right now. But really, as a digital game, it is available everywhere, even on the Nintendo Switch, which I've heard is pretty great. So wherever or however you get it, you should check it out. It's a no-brainer that Techland returned to the West for Gunslinger, because their venture into telling a modern Western tale fell flat on its face. And it's no surprise that they immediately got to work on a new game to forget the Cartel as fast as possible. But also because the Cartel was a financial failure as well, so getting any game out on the market was really a priority for Techland's pocketbook. That may also be the reason that they decided to go with a budget title as the next series installment, a small-scale, digital-only release to tip the scales in their favor from the jump. The fans spoke their mind on the Cartel, and thankfully Techland listened. Everyone agrees that Call of Juarez belongs in a traditional Wild West setting. No one from Techland or Ubisoft is shy to admit that the Cartel was a failure, and they tried new things that just didn't work, and they are making this game go back to the roots of what did. And honestly, that's like a breath of fresh air. Developers who listen to their fans, who realize their mistakes and decide to act on them instead of continuing to just do whatever they want. It's what Techland did back when making Bound in Blood. They took everything good from the first game in the series and just made it better, and they built upon it. And now they are removing all the terrible things from the Cartel and just building upon that. I can't speak to Techland as a company today. I'm not really in the know with all their current titles, but the way they handled and represent themselves based on this series alone makes them top class developers in my book. Anyway, I want to steer clear of any more bashing of the Cartel from this point on. I have a whole 36-minute video of me doing that already. The dive back into a Western tale came with the idea of incorporating real Western legends like Billy the Kid, Pat Garrett, Wyatt Earp, Butch Cassidy, and Jesse James, along with several others. But more importantly, the idea of how the game should be told featuring these monumental figures was front and center. The team realized the thing that made this time period of the Wild West so special was that all the stories and legends kind of mixed truth and fiction. Everything was often a little embellished, little white lies here and there that get expanded on as the stories are told at campfires and bars for years and years. This game is one of those stories. It's told from the perspective of Silas Greaves, recounting his travels and run-ins with all the outlaws and bandits that everyone knows of and can often chime in on the story with him, sometimes pointing out some things that don't really add up, but that's what makes these stories so good. The game is played as the story is told, shamelessly stolen from Supergiant's masterpiece Bastion, where the game is formed in front of the player's eyes, with things appearing and the level changing as things are narrated.
And in the end, a path appeared before me that I had not seen before.
This form of interactive storytelling seemed to fit like a glove with the fast and loose tales of Wild West legends. They purposefully made the narrator unreliable, often forgetting things or seemingly adding things here and there to make it make more sense as he tells the stories, or as an answer to some criticisms that he gets from the audience.
Hold on, were you attacked by Apaches? What happened to the cowboys?
Did I say they were Apaches? I said Clanton's cowboys attacked me Apache style.
Two films that deal with the myths overtaking reality in the public consciousness were also big inspiration for the writer of this game, Harris Orkin, writer on previous games in the series as well. The two films being The Man Who Shot Liberty Valance and Little Big Man. Particularly a quote from Liberty Valance,
"When the legend becomes fact, print the legend." That's pretty much the central theme of Call of Juarez Gunslinger, the collision between truth and myth.
Orkin also used the unreliable narrator trope to combat the ever-present problem with shooting games, ludonarrative dissonance, when a game's mechanics directly clash with the narrative. Like when a player is supposed to be a good guy but may gun down hundreds of people throughout the game. It creates this disconnect in how you're supposed to feel. However, in Gunslinger, Silas is exaggerating his adventures, sometimes obviously so, where enemies appear out of thin air, one after another, and it doesn't remotely make sense that there would be that many people in such a small area. But when Silas is going on in the story, so will the enemies, and he will continue to take them all out of commission one at a time, and quite gracefully, I might add. The thing that I think made Gunslinger so great was the fact that it told a story that Hollywood can't. It is strictly a video game story that uses the medium brilliantly to present itself. Where games like Bound in Blood or even the Red Dead series mimic a blockbuster Western movie in ways, Gunslinger is through and through just a video game. Silas will add things incorrectly on purpose, like when someone listening to his story falls asleep and you can hear the snoring during gameplay, he suddenly shouts out,
"Indians surrounded me from all sides,"
just to wake up the man snoring, but then saying that that didn't actually happen, even though you as the player just spent some time killing those enemies that Silas summoned into existence.
They were Indians?
No. I just wanted to make sure Steve was paying attention. Now, where was I?
There was also a moment during a train mission where Silas gets up and he goes to the bathroom, seemingly stopping the story. You, the player, can continue walking through the train car only to open the door and then appear back in the same one you just started in, unable to progress the story until the narrator makes it back from emptying his bladder. The whole time you can listen to the bar patrons doubting the validity of Silas's tale behind his back. This was one of the cooler moments that really highlights this style of storytelling. There are also discrepancies in level design, like the train mission. It looks like it's set in the southwest United States, but in reality, the James gang within that level operated in Missouri and Kansas. A much different looking landscape than what was shown, but these things aren't harped on too much simply because the nature of this unreliable storytelling. How the game presents itself also aids in the storytelling. They went with a comic book, cel-shaded look and design, something that creates the sense of a Wild West hero story, kind of like a Quentin Tarantino movie mixed with Borderlands, something that is clearly a story being told and not a historical recounting of things. With 2 out of the 3 prior games in the series, the developers team did extensive research throughout production. And as with most video games, the historical accuracy is a strong basis of the game, but of course video games need to be fun and entertaining, and history is not often that. There is a sweet spot of historical accuracy and myths that we have built up around them. And this is sort of where the characters of the game come from. We don't want to hear Billy the Kid didn't actually kill 21 people, or that high noon duels were extremely rare, as were bank robberies. We want those things to be true, and finding a balance makes things slightly grounded and extremely fun at the same time. Each of the real life outlaws in the game lived up to their legend. They were all over the top and iconic characters, often introduced in a stylized comic book cutscene preceding a duel with them. You can even find Easter eggs in the game that give some more insights on the real history of these legends and characters. There's even one for good old Ray McCall, cementing him as one of the baddest gunslingers around, even though no one talks about him for some reason. Silas Greaves himself was based on Clint Eastwood in Sergio Leone's Dollars trilogy, and partly on Pistol Pete Frank Eaton, both in style and mannerisms. But with the ideas on the foundation of this game squared away, I think it's time to talk about the gameplay of Gunslinger and see what this hype is all about. Gunslinger is through and through a first-person shooter, and as a first in the series, you only play as one character the whole game, the bounty hunter Silas Greaves. The game is presented in a level-based fashion with points awarded for shots landed, much like an arcade shooter, with level and recaps showing how well you did as well. Levels are mostly shooting focused, with waypoint markers and objectives listed to progress to the next area of shooting baddies, but occasionally there is some light platforming and some collectibles to hunt for if you're into that kind of thing. But this game is primarily made for shooting some bandits. At the end of each level, there is usually some kind of boss battle, sometimes a themed fight, like dodging dynamite thrown by Henry Plummer, or battling the tank Emmett Dalton, who survived 23 gunshots in an attempted bank robbery in real life. But also sometimes just a simple duel, like with John Wesley Hardin or George Flatnose Curry. Within these levels, you get your standard array of Western weapons to wield wonderfully. You got your pistols, rifles, and shotguns to choose from, like prior games in the series, but this game added a sort of experience progression to the gameplay. As you land shots and gather points, the more skillful the shots, the more points, obviously. You can allocate them to different skill trees that form to your preferred style of gameplay. The first tree is Gunslinger, which focuses on handguns, and then there's Ranger, my favorite one, which focuses on rifles, and then Trapper, which focuses on shotguns. Depending on how good of a shot you are, you can max out your preferred tree and then continue to level up some others as well, or just dabble in all of them as you want. But when you beat the game, you also get a new game plus mode that carries over all your skills, so you can eventually just have all the perks available if you want to. This is what made the gameplay in this game stand out. Some of the perks that you get really change the gameplay and make it such an enjoyable experience. Some of my favorites are Eagle Eye, which slightly slows down time when aiming down the sights of a rifle, and Executioner, a quick consumption of your concentration meter to line up perfect headshots of every enemy around you. Speaking of which, there is a concentration mode in this game as well, a welcome return from prior games in the series. In this game, activating the mode slows down time and highlights enemies in red to make it easier to pick them off, especially if they're hiding behind some cover or in a hard to see area. There are also some slight variations on the modes as well, like the Executioner perk that I mentioned above, as well as door breaching, falling from a big height, and quicktime events that require rapid key input to take out an ambush of several enemies at once. A feature called Sense of Death is also in the game. Upon what would be receiving a killing shot from the enemy, time will slow down and allow you to dodge the incoming projectile in order to save yourself from death's grip. Another thing brought in from prior games, as mentioned, is duels. They aren't terrible in this game, but they are definitely not my favorite part either. Instead of dancing around your opponent like in Bound in Blood, you instead balance both your hands in relation to your gun at the same time as your reticle in relation to the enemy. The more you focus on the enemy, the smaller the reticle becomes, and in return, the more accurate your shots. A neat added feature is the ability to now draw before your opponent if you so choose, getting the drop on them and killing them. It results in a dishonorable duel with a lower score at the end of the level, but it is always an option in the Wild West. They are dead and you get to live another day. The storytelling of the game also plays parts in how the game actually plays, with its interactive narrative structure. As you are playing the game, Silas is telling the story, and as Silas is an unreliable drunkard, there are often inconsistencies and revisions throughout the tale that take place in real time for you, as you are part of his tale, sometimes literally rewinding whole sections of the story that you just played because he said that was something that could have happened.
It's a good thing that I abandoned that ridiculous plan before I even tried it. Instead, I spotted a ladder way into the mine from the opposite side.
Or he needs to alter it in some way, or sometimes say he finds himself trapped, but after killing all the enemies he remembers that there actually was a way out, and the terrain will change real time in front of you to fit his tale.
I swear I couldn't see any way out of this trap. But suddenly, one just appeared, kind of like a miracle.
There are countless moments in every level where this storytelling is present, and it's honestly brilliant. And the way it's presented in a first-person shooter game like this is just amazing, and endlessly entertaining even on repeat playthroughs.
Now wait a second, how'd they stop this train in the first place?
Well, the James boys were experts at this. They hopped a freight train having heard there was a big payroll in the express safe. So, I hopped the same train.
For as good as the storytelling is, the story being told really isn't all that deep. It's just exciting and attention-grabbing, like most stories being told in saloons in exchange for free drinks. The game starts in Abilene, Kansas in 1910. The Wild West is over. Silas Greaves arrives into town only to get nearly knocked off his horse by a speeding car coming down the road. He enters a saloon with a handful of people in it. A sarcastic man named Jack, an old man named Steve, a young teenager named Dwight, and two staff of the bar being Molly and Ben. He introduces himself as Silas Greaves, where he is soon recognized by young Dwight as the bounty hunter he once was, and is offered a beer in exchange for some stories. His first story goes into New Mexico in 1880. In the middle of the Lincoln County War, Silas is teamed up with the Regulators, the infamous clique led by Billy the Kid. He is hunting down a man named Roscoe Bob Bryant, who is riding with the Johnny Kinney gang, sworn enemies of the Regulators. During the battle ensuing, both Billy and Silas are arrested by the one and only Pat Garrett and his posse and are sentenced to hang. But before the hangman gets his pay, Billy and Silas make a break for it, parting ways, but Silas flees released to Mexico. In Mexico, Silas sets his sights on a cowboy named Johnny Ringo, a past acquaintance of Roscoe Bob, the man he's been hunting for. Ringo is now part of the Cochise County Cowboys, and under the order of the Mexican rurales, Silas heads to Guadalupe Canyon to take them all out. He kills their leader, Newman Haynes Clanton. Following the group to Iron Springs, Arizona, he kills their second in command, Curly Bill Brocius, and several months later he finally catches up to Ringo and kills him as well. After killing all these high-profile men, Silas realizes just how much money there is to make in bounty hunting, and also tirelessly hunting down Roscoe Bob requires some money to get it done, so he takes a few bounties to reach his own goals. He goes after Henry Plummer, former sheriff of Bannock, Montana, who now leads a gang of murderers and thieves called the Innocents. After cashing in on that, he goes after another bounty, this one again affiliated with Bob, that one being John Wesley Hardin. He tracks John down to Abilene, Kansas, and during a duel, he dodges all 12 of his shots, forcing him to surrender and get arrested. But unfortunately, Bob is nowhere to be found. He goes on to recount hunting a medicine man named Grey Wolf who led a retaliation against US Army soldiers in response to their unprovoked massacre at his daughter's wedding. Grey Wolf ultimately escaped from Silas, the only person to ever do so. Silas then goes to Coffeyville, Kansas to stop the Daltons' disastrous attempt to rob 2 banks at the same time. 2 of the brothers get away, but brother Emmett staying behind, suffering 3 gunshot wounds, but ultimately surviving. After doing all this running and gunning and taking out outlaws aplenty, it's at this point in the story that Silas starts to elaborate on what brings him to these moments to begin with, his hunt for Roscoe Bob. In 1868, in Juarez, Mexico, Bob, Ringo, and Jim Reed strung up Silas and his 2 brothers. Bob decides to let Silas live, giving him a gold coin telling him at least he didn't leave him with nothing, while Silas is forced to watch his brothers perish. Silas jumps right back into the stories. He said he heard that Bob was riding around with the Wild Bunch, but after killing the leader, George Curry, there is no sign of Bob. He hears the gang got back together 5 years later under the leadership of Kid Curry, who he tracks down to Parachute, Colorado, killing the gang yet again, before confronting Kid Curry and asking where Bob is, but Curry only says that Bob is in Bolivia with Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid. Silas kills Curry for his lack of help. Silas jumps back to a past story talking about Jim Reed, the other member of the Juarez gang he hasn't gotten to that killed his brothers. He heard that Jim was riding with the James Younger gang, and Silas interrupted their attempted train robbery in Winston, Missouri. Silas duels and wounds Jesse James and chases Jim Reed into the Ozarks to take him out for good, leaving old Bob as the only unspoken member of the gang that killed his brothers. Silas wraps up his story by saying 6 months before the day that he sits in the bar and tells this tale, he hears that Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid return to the States. Hoping that Bob was with them, he tracks them down to a ghost town in the Wind River Range. He kills them both, but again there was no Bob. However, in Butch's dying breath, he tells Silas that Bob was never with them. He fled to Abilene years ago and changed his name to Ben. He simply just supplied booze to the Younger gang and he wasn't really part of their crimes. So there's the big reveal. Ben in the bar has been Bob this whole time, and Silas throws down the gauntlet. He lets the cat out of the bag. He spills the beans, or whichever phrase you prefer. Silas is in that bar today to kill Ben, or as he truly is, Roscoe Bob Bryant. From this point, the player has 2 choices. You can kill Bob or you can let Bob go. Choosing to kill him changes everyone's attitude towards Silas. He becomes the bad man fueled by vengeance, probably more murderous and vile than Bob ever was in his day, killing countless men to reach his goal. Molly goes to the sheriff. Steve ushers Dwight out of the saloon, who he refers to as young Eisenhower, just a random future US president chilling in a bar in his teens. Silas leaves the bar soon after, stating that he doesn't know where he's going and it doesn't really matter as he sold his soul for revenge. But choosing to spare Bob, Silas recounts he doesn't even know what his life is outside of chasing revenge. He's become a stone-cold killer and he regrets it. He asks Dwight his name and he tells him that he is Dwight Eisenhower. He is on his way to West Point. Silas tells him, "You don't tear down the world out of anger and spite like I did. You build it up. You do something decent with your life." You know, I really love this story. I think it blended the chaotic jump from iconic Western legend to legend, incorporating the fact or fiction of Silas's involvement with their iconic moments, like the Dalton gang robbing 2 banks in Coffeyville, Kansas, or the Younger gang robbing the Rock Island Railroad in Missouri, all while having a personal element to it, not having Silas as this empty husk of a character that just outshot every gunslinger ever, but a man on the hunt for the one outlaw in particular that was responsible for killing his brothers. The twist at the end became very obvious throughout the game, as Ben would often chime into the story and correct Silas, and Silas would be very abrasive towards him, mentioning sometimes that your past always has a way of catching up to you. And even though it was suspected, it was still welcome and great to see. The twist that did get me was Dwight Eisenhower. I had no idea that this little kid who was a fan of bounty hunter tales and legends of the West was future President Eisenhower, and Silas, in this world, influenced Eisenhower into the man that he became. Obviously, Silas is a fictional character, but it's super cool to tie into the game. It's all far-fetched and over the top, and it's almost grounded enough to be believable that all of this could have actually happened, but that's the beauty of a Western tale. And the writers and creative directors of this game made it perfect for Gunslinger. It also didn't overstep the gameplay in any way, and instead complemented it with its unique storytelling style. This is one of the games where I don't understand why it was rated so low by so many critics. It averaged 7 out of 10 scores, which isn't terrible, but in the world of game reviews, it is pretty bad to see. Most people praise this game, calling it the best in the series, which I would have to agree with on the fun shooting aspect. I do think Bound in Blood was better as an overall Western tale and experience, but Gunslinger is for sure a more fun game to hop in and play. Jim Sterling, one of the reviewers not afraid to use the whole 1 to 10 scale, previously gave the Cartel a 2.5 out of 10, and for this game, he was impressed with the redemption of Techland, scoring Gunslinger an 8.5 out of 10, praising the humor, the art style, the voice acting, the meta-narrative, and the shooting, of course, with others being a little more critical on the game, knocking the repetitive nature, lack of firearm diversity, and subpar boss battles. I think the game leaned heavier on the simple but done right aspect. They didn't reinvent the wheel gun with this game, so there was nothing new or novel with it, but what they did have, they did extremely well, which in this market lands you around a 7 out of 10, I suppose. This game sold really well and it boosted Techland back to where they needed to be. It was the 3rd best-selling PSN title in May of 2013, only being beaten out by Far Cry 3 Blood Dragon and Terraria. And with 2 of those 3 games being published by Ubisoft, I'm sure that there were smiles all around. The game continues to go on sale often and is sold regularly on Steam and GOG, often being promoted in offers and sales packages. In 2019, this game even got a port to the Nintendo Switch, a platform that has welcomed many digital titles to its catalog, so I'm sure out of the whole Call of Juarez catalog, Gunslinger's probably got to be the top earner of the series. Unfortunately, this is the last time that we have seen a Call of Juarez series in almost 10 years. Techland has the rights to the IP, but it looks like zombie games are their new bread and butter. But good for them though, they were able to end the series on an awesome note. Gunslinger is incredible. Even today it runs super smooth and it's a ton of fun to play, even just to pop in for a few levels of really well done shooting. For a game that's nearly 10 years old, you can't really beat it. And it truly redeemed the series for many people. Most people probably only know of the Call of Juarez series because of the popularity of Gunslinger. And as someone who spent the last few months playing through each and every title of the series, I'm happy to see Techland striving and moving on, even if they've left this niche little Western series back on the old dusty trail. Thank you for tuning in to this supercut of the Call of Juarez series. These are all games that I covered individually in the past and decided to throw them into a single video for all those out there that haven't seen them or preferred longer videos to listen to like a podcast or something. I plan on doing this supercut style thing after covering series with more than 2 games in them, so the next one will be Dead to Rights once I finally finish up that final game. As always, thank you for watching. I'd like to give a special shout out to my patrons and YouTube members, Doc Schwinn, Kid Kingpin, Zachary Parkerson, Snowflake, Anonymous Starkweather, Crash Bandicoot 25, Grand Taquito, Ben Stevens, Potty, Yayman, Alfred Correa, Marshall Duff, Kenneth Butler, Scribe Slendy, Matthew Taylor, Nick LaBrosa, Ethan Carpenter, Nico Mendez, Grizzly Wisley, Sexy Pickles, Forjum Nas, Mike Easton. As always, thank you for watching. I hope to see you next time. Peace.